We launched masterQueue at a financial services technology conference called Finovate in the spring of 2011. We'd been selected from 600 applicants as one of the 60 startup companies to present a 7-minute live demo of our software in front of 1,000 bankers in San Francisco.
We transform inexperienced and low-performing collectors into top performers. And we're able to do this because we use the data in ways that's simply not possible with companies who are still using paper reports and legacy collection systems. One example of how masterQueue uses data in a unique way is with our mapping technology. We built this through strategic relationships that we've developed with Navtech and Bing Maps. Here, a person posted a photo of themselves online using a GPS-enabled smartphone. masterQueue grabbed the meta tag from the phone, gathered all the relevant data on the person that was associated with the address where the photo was taken, the property owner, their phone number, the occupants of the address, their current phone numbers, their email addresses. What does this mean to your bottom line? Well, the client that I mentioned a minute ago, they're saving an hour per employee per day, and if you multiply that over a 600-person call center, that's the equivalent of 77 full-time employees a day gathering data. That doesn't even take into account how much more effective they are at their job and the more dramatic improvements that they've seen in locating their lost assets.
Looking back at this, what's ironic is that we were talking about machine learning and predictive analytics and artificial intelligence and big data before those words were even common in business. When we built masterQueue, we knew collectors and skip tracers had a problem. There was too much data to use manual processes to gather, organize, and track it. The other problem was the lenders had a bigger problem as the collectors were fine with not making phone calls. They didn't use data in the same way that I was taught to use data back when I started as a field rep and a collector at Chrysler. Back then you made phone calls and you spoke to people to verify an address before you placed it out for repo. Now, there's too much data to gather manually, too much for your brain to efficiently process, and it's a hassle to copy and paste selected pieces of data. So with that in mind, we've spent the past 6 years working diligently on a solution, one that many of you here today use to create efficiencies in your collection, skip, and repossession process workflow. We call that solution the core of masterQueue, or the masterQueue core. When you utilize all the tools in masterQueue, it allows you to see the magic happen, as suddenly you're strengthening your core competencies in all aspects of collections, skip, and repo. There are 6 pieces to the core of masterQueue, and all are important to each other. Moving to the top of the list in 2017 is the most important of all the features in masterQueue: security.
This is in 12 countries, 5,000 staff. You'd think they'd be secure, wouldn't you? Make some noise. Full screen. A smoke screen. A decoy breach to hide what they're really after.
When we launched masterQueue in 2011, security was nothing like it is today. And in 2017, we saw major security breaches that caused the game to change again. Software code reviews by external third parties became the norm, as did constant ethical hacking and penetration testing to ensure everyone's PII was safe from all access points, inside or out. The biggest trend we saw in 2017 was that the small homegrown softwares couldn't pass the audit requirements of the larger, more sophisticated lenders. While we saw security trump compliance for the first time in 2017, that doesn't mean the regulators have let up. We added even more compliance tracking tools in masterQueue in 2017, including rules that specifically address the proposed CFPB debt collection info sharing rules coming in 2018, with the first rewrite of the FDCPA since it was originally published, before there were computers, before there were cell phones, texting, email, or even call recording. Once we get past the security and compliance requirements, now we can get back to why we actually built masterQueue in the first place: to improve efficiency. We have more integrations into more data providers than any software in any industry. And by allowing our users to automatically gather data and not have to go look for data, we save them a tremendous amount of time and money. Once you've gathered the data, how you organize it is the next step. One surprising thing we've seen since launching masterQueue is how willing companies are to trust the intuition of their employees. Intuition is the most powerful tool in the toolbox inside of your brain, and no computer can beat that when it's coming from a person with true intuitive skills based upon their expertise of a certain area. However, we've proven that even the most intuitive skip tracers with years of experience will still make mistakes that computers or programmable predictive analytics will not make. And that's why many people in the know are saying that artificial intelligence will have such a huge impact in the financial services space, especially in debt collection. We've literally been saying this since we launched masterQueue in 2011. And unlike many companies that talk about artificial intelligence, we've actually built a predictive model that uses a recalculating algorithm called the FindX score. And when we place scores on phone numbers and insert them into our no-contact call queue, it drives right-party contact percentages up significantly, in some cases over 100% of where the company currently is at using intuitive and manual methods of deciding what phone number to call when trying to contact a person they've lost touch with. Once you have the data and the predictive analytics, the next step in masterQueue is to place automated workflow on the steps of the process you want to follow. This becomes data science versus the art of skip tracing. Again, intuition's great, but following a step-by-step process in the earliest stages of no contact, before the second payment's due or before you assign a skip for repo, is a much more efficient process when managing teams. Not everyone is gifted with the intuition of an Alex Price or a Columbo. While their intuition may be right enough to where it makes the skip process an art and a great tool they're blessed to have, the problem is that most collectors and skip tracers' intuition is not at that level. And then, at that point, intuition is a very inefficient tool that can cause you, your company, and your downstream vendors who are the recipient of your poor intuition a lot of wasted time and money. In 2016, the CFPB announced proposed debt collection rules, and our chairman Mark Floyd and I joined Stephanie Alsbrooks of Defy Solutions to talk about the impact of these rules on the front and back ends of the auto finance lending and debt collections industries. While those rules were supposed to go into effect in 2017, it now appears we're looking at sometime in 2018. These rules will have a significant impact on vendors and lenders, so we wrote a number of ways to ensure you're protected in masterQueue. But first, let's look at what and who these newly proposed laws will impact.
Welcome to Risk Watch. I'm Taylor Reich. If the CFPB gets its way, new protections in the debt collection market would limit the contact collectors may have with consumers and impose more stringent requirements designed to reduce the number of complaints the CFPB receives from consumers.
The problem, according to the CFPB, stems from information getting lost or altered when debts are transferred to collection agencies or debt buyers. It argues that these problems don't only hurt consumers, they also drive up costs for collectors and hurt the industry as a whole. On July 28, 2016, the Bureau proposed an overhaul to the debt collection process that seeks to increase oversight from the first time a collector looks at a delinquent loan to the last time he or she attempts to collect on the debt. The 1977 Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, or FDCPA, made progress in preventing unfair or abusive debt collection practices, but until the creation of the CFPB, no government agency has had the authority to issue regulations to implement the act. And that is precisely what the CFPB is hoping to do. I want to discuss 3 key parts of the proposal that could affect your financial institution. First, in its outline about the proposed changes, the CFPB pointed out that the FDCPA covers debt collectors who are collecting debt owed to a third party, not collectors who are collecting debt owed directly to them. Dodd-Frank expanded that coverage to some collectors who collect their own debts, but from the get-go, the CFPB makes it clear that their rule changes would apply to everyone who collects debt from consumers: collection agencies, debt buyers, collection law firms, and loan servicers, including both large firms with over 100 employees and small 20-person shops. The various trade associations are analyzing the provisions of the proposal to see how they will affect financial institutions specifically. But if your financial institution handles any debt collection in-house, the rule will apply to you. Second, as I mentioned before, the proposal comes in response to the large numbers of complaints consumers have made about collectors trying to collect from the wrong consumer or for the wrong amount. The CFPB has several ideas on how to answer these complaints. For example, it proposes to impose mandatory steps collectors must take to substantiate the debts they are trying to collect. It proposes to revamp disclosures surrounding litigation, consumer rights, and old debts. It's proposing strict rules limiting phone calls and phone messages from collectors.
This slide shows how you can set up masterQueue to automatically perform all of your TCPA, SCRA, and other regulatory scrubs, and how masterQueue will stop numbers from being called due to regulatory rules, and these rules stay with the account. They stay with the person and they stay with the phone number. So even if the account is moved to an outside vendor, then the rule still stays attached to the account, to the person or the phone number, and no matter who internally or externally at a third-party vendor is working the account, the rule stays in place. The masterQueue Chorus Solutions addresses many needs of lenders and their vendors who are working to locate customers they've lost touch with. We're excited to have you here with us at our 2017 user conference, and we hope you find the time you spend with us to be informative and entertaining.
All right, great. Thank you guys for sitting through that. The idea was to talk about a journey that we decided to get on a while ago. Back in 1988, I married this wonderful woman up front, and somehow we got into the repossession and skip tracing business that I had been in. And Perla and I used to dress in black and go repossess cars in the middle of the night. Say hi, Perla. So what's interesting is we started a business, and we didn't really realize it would kind of get to where it got to. And we'll talk a little bit about that and a little bit about the timeline, but first I'd like to introduce Alex Chang.
Good morning, guys. Now that you guys were kind of put back to sleep, we're going to wake you up just a little bit because of the dark, and we put the light back on. If everyone can just stand up real quick for me, just real quick. It'll be real brief. We're just going to get some blood flowing because it's going to be a long session. You guys know what you guys committed to. I value all your guys' time. Just shake a little bit and then go to your neighbor and just thank them for being here. Introduce yourselves because we're all going to get comfortable here. So we value all your guys' presence and your time, and the reason why I wanted you guys to get introduced with one another and at least say hello is because we're all here for one main purpose, right? To learn something new, to take something home and really put it in our operations and just move forward, because we know that there's always changing regulations and knowledge out there that we can take home and see how are my competitors or my partners implementing it in their own organization, and how can I do that but also do it better. So that's what we're here for. So just shake a little bit and then go ahead and take a seat. There is a flyer in front of you that is an app. We are hoping to be a little interactive with everyone. Throughout the presentation, we'll ask for some questions, and we'd love your feedback. That way we can really chime in on your concerns and your questions. Downloading the app will allow you to really get your feedback and your concerns addressed immediately while we're here at the presentation. And we're hoping to give you as many nuggets as possible, especially when it comes to the industry and how masterQueue can also help you. We have lots of experts in Intelligence, but also we have many co-sponsors here and experts on how they have also improved masterQueue, and they can also improve your operations. And to start all of this, we always start with the man that started the company. Please welcome John Lewis.
Thanks, Alex. So, as I mentioned, it's been a little bit of a journey. So in 2007, we had been about 7 years outside of selling a business we started, American Recovery and Skip Busters. And I see Dave Baker here. How's that company doing now?
Strong.
Perla, we let it go really early. But I don't know that we could have ever done what you guys did. You're the largest forwarding and skip tracing company in the industry. You're set the trend for everyone that's chasing you, and you guys have done a great job. Appreciate that. So, after we took a few years off, I got a phone call from a guy who I had known for a number of years, and as we all kind of know in this industry, we gain friendships because we spend so much time together. And guy calls me up, and he was a field rep like I was. He was at Ford, and I was at Chrysler. And how many people in this room were field reps for captive finance companies at some point repossessing cars? Okay, there's a few of us left. So Rod Ahrens had called and said, hey, I'm now running collections at Harley-Davidson. I got 100 skips I can't find. I've gone through a few of the other players, and I'm wondering if you can help me. And I think I drove over the hill, and I think you gave me the files with the titles in them, and I drove back to Sacramento. That's kind of how it used to be, or the old days. And Rod, you can share a little bit. What was, as we started to look at all this massive amount of data, what was the thoughts? We sat down over a cocktail napkin probably and said, man, if we could do this.
Yeah, I think it was in a hotel in downtown San Francisco, if I remember right.
Yeah.
You probably still have that napkin somewhere.
I probably do.
There were some boxes on it, but no, it's when John and I talked, and I've known John for, gosh, I don't know, probably 25 years now in the industry. But being the old collector and skip tracer that I was, and John had a similar background, you used to have all your papers laid out in front of you, arrows and highlighter drawn, and trying to connect the dots to find either a person or an asset. Well, that's really where John came in with the thought behind masterQueue to really do all of that through the platform. So make those connections, bring in the data, make the connections, start to kind of draw those arrows that I was used to in the old days, drawn on a piece of paper. And that's really kind of how it was born. I mean, that's really where the data was brought in to kind of paint that picture. And we brought it in. We were the first beta test partner.
Yep.
We saw our skip tracer performance increase literally overnight because they had those leads presented to them in a way that they didn't have to take the time to look through 3 different reports and draw the arrows and try to connect the dots. It was being done for them, so they were on the phone. And that was the key that really was the magic that we saw. It's really, as I told John many times, it's got lightning in a bottle here is really what you have because you've taken all that manual work and transferred it over to this application software and the app that you can run very easily. But yeah, that's really I was eager to jump in as a first beta partner because I saw it with Harley-Davidson. I saw the power. It was an easy decision to make.
Yep. And what's been interesting about the relationship is we continue to rely on each other a little bit with new ideas. Just today we launched a press release with DRN. Jeremiah's in the room here, and we basically we always knew their data was very important, so we were able to integrate their data, but not just their live hits, because you guys got that covered already. If the car shows, you're picking it up. But it's more about the historical data and how can that historical data be used to look at right party contacts, how can it be used to look at kind of the history of where the person's been. And a lot of what you're going to hear today and a lot of what you're going to hear over the next couple days is about the history. So it's not so much the history of what Pearl and I have done or what we've done with our team here now, but it's really about the history of an account and how you can look at the dynamics of what happens in collections and what happens in skip tracing and in repo, and how you can use the past to kind of predict what can happen in the future because we now have those tools available. So as mentioned, we started a skip tracing company. We integrated all these data providers in 2009. Rod started to notice our numbers were increasing on his skip accounts, so he said that we want to try it. So he became our first beta partner in 2010. We launched it, as you saw in the video, in 2011 at Finovate. 2012, we sat down. I see Sam in the room from iRepo. We sat down with Sam's boss, John Rhodes, and we had actually tried to integrate with RDN because they were kind of the main player, and John was the new upstart with repros. And he was kind enough to say, sure, we'll integrate. So we integrated repros with masterQueue back in 2012 and have a strong relationship, and that integration is probably as strong as any of the ones that we have. And in 2013, we realized that telephony was going to become important because we didn't know they were going to launch the CFPB 2 weeks after we launched our product. And that completely threw us off. So a lot of people are like, hey, how come you haven't grown faster? What are you waiting for? Well, when you have to build 2 years worth of security and compliance and all the different infrastructure you need to handle CFPB level of regulatory compliance, it takes a while to do that. So that was where we decided VoIP integration was important. So you could click a phone number, dial it, record the call, have it all built in. The challenge is everybody has their own phone systems.
So when you have your own phone system, unfortunately, it's hard to make a change to do that. But I think over time, you're going to see the integration of the telephony and collections become a strong point. Then in 2014, we integrated RDN. They changed leadership and finally said, okay, yeah, it makes sense to do that. And then we integrated, we wrote a feed into the DoD for SCRA scrubs because that became important. We wrote a feed into Newstar for 01 through telephone scrubs, so we could take a phone number that we got instantaneously with data and be able to tell you who the caller ID goes to. Is it a cell phone? Is it a landline? And then that made not only the calling easier, but that made the predictive analytics a little better because even though my cell phone says Lewis on it, it says Perla. Well, if I know from the data that Perla is my wife, now all of a sudden I can tell that that's a more probable right party contact live from Newstar, and they're, them Telecordia are the two people that really are driving the right party contacts off of their ability to tell you who the cell phone landline is it live, and also the other thing that's really interesting is when's the best time to call the guy? They're looking at the phone records, so they know, hey, between 12 and 1, he must be taking lunch from work because you're able to go in and make a call and actually get a hold of this person. That's their best time to call. So that, I think, is going to become another thing that's very powerful, too. In 2015, we started to do tier transfer, the tier transfer process. BBVA came on, and I see Zach here, and what ended up working with them was that they wanted to use iRepo, but they wanted to use masterQueue as well. So they were able to take the assignments in masterQueue that they were working for collections and then be able to divvy them out through iRepo to the different forwarders and skip tracing companies, and we had a automated tier transfer process in effect to where they would be able to, at 30 days, move it to another vendor, take the work based upon performance, and divvy it out accordingly. So that was a great thing. And then we also had my brother-in-law, Michael UCW, and he runs Digital Dog, which is the largest repossession company in California. And they came to us and basically said, we really want to build routing software. And what's interesting about routing and repossessions is Perla and I went through that for a number of years. I'd get home at 11 o'clock at night because I made all the routes for every single guy that worked for us when we owned Crown Auto Recovery. And it was really intuition that drove me to make those routes. There were 10 clipboards, the Valley and South Central LA and Long Beach and Orange County, and I had guys that would go to all those different areas, and I had a basket of deals, and I would look at each deal and say, I'll never pick up that client's car. Oh, it's Bank of America, first time run, we'll get that 80% of the time because it's in the Valley and there's no garages. You just go through all this stuff in your head, and if you could build a software around that, then that makes it more intuitive and interesting for the repossessor because he's going to be more productive when he works his route. So we ended up building Repo Route. We built a phenomenal software. 2016, the debt collection monitoring came into place where they started to propose new rules, and we started to think, wow, there's this FDCPA rule that was written a long time ago, and how are we going to address that where you're only allowed to call the brother one time, or you're going to have call frequency or data sharing? How is each person that touches the account through the life cycle going to be able to see who called who? So we built in the tools to be able to do that, and our team will kind of tell you a little bit about that as we go on. And then for some of the clients, we built single sign-on and a lot of other security infrastructure to be able to make sure that we could deal with the biggest banks in the country all the way down to the guys in the truck if need be. Then in 2017, we actually towards the middle of 2016, we had a board meeting in the beginning of the year, and we had brought on Mark Floyd as our chairman back in the summer of the year before. And prior to that, it was really just our team that was doing everything. And Steve Schroeder, who's here, who purchased Repo Route from us, had built a company called CoreLogic, one of the probably more successful companies, not just in Sacramento, but in the data industry as a whole. It's now a $6 billion company, I think, and 3.7, there you go. Dave Baker, you guys got a little ways to go there. But built a company around predictive analytics and around data, and around getting data and being able to utilize data. And Steve will be speaking tomorrow. We met at the beginning of the year, and Mark said, you're running 3 companies, even though we really were just running masterQueue. We had good people in place to run Repo Route and Find John Doe, but he said, you really need to just focus on one thing, masterQueue, then you'll probably be more successful with masterQueue. So Steve stepped up and said, yeah, I'll play in the repo space. I've seen it now for 6 or 7 years, and give us a little input on what you're going to be sharing tomorrow about predictive analytics and repossession.
Just a quick high level. Spent the last several months modeling the predictive ability to determine if you recover a vehicle. So as soon as that loan goes to default, and I have a very brief information about that,
What's an example of a piece of, can you share with us? And I know you can't give up your secret sauce, but is there an example of a piece of data for all the people that got up early to come in the room that you can?
Yeah, so think about it this way. Would you think that somebody that has a master's degree or a bachelor's degree is easier to recover from or more difficult to recover from? Incorrect. More difficult. More likely to have garage. So they're going to be much more difficult. It'll take more runs. But your chances of recovering from them are substantially higher. Okay? So it's more difficult to acquire the vehicle, but it's more likely to be acquired. Okay? Because they don't move. They have a house, they live there, and it's just hard to find their vehicle because it's always stored somewhere. Whether it's in a garage, and when they're at home, it's in a garage. So it's hard to recover, but you're going to get back. How about somebody who is extremely low income? Easier? Harder? Much harder, because they can't get their vehicle payment. They're more likely not to be able to make their housing payment, and they can make that. Where do they live? Where do they reside? Is that address accurate? And how are you going to find them? Right? These are just simple pieces of information, and there's lots more. There's terabytes of information in the world that you can apply. Say, what's your likelihood of recovering this vehicle before you even start? Side up.
So you're at 8:30 tomorrow morning in the general session room, I think?
8:30 or 9,
Yeah, somewhere around 9 o'clock, somewhere around there. And I think that's in the room right next door to us, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that'll be interesting. And Fine John Doe, that was a tough one because we had owned that company for 10 years. And the question was, how do you take a business that you've had for 10 years and you're so close to your staff if you can't find the exact right partners to take it over from you? And we were really lucky. We met a family out of Chicago called the Bloom family. And they weren't a private equity group. They didn't want to come in and spin and turn our company. They really want to run it like they run their other businesses, a family business. They just happen to be billionaires, and they wanted to get in the auto finance industry. So they acquired Fine John Doe, and they immediately went out and hired Catherine Kunkel had been running the business for 10 years and very successful, and probably one of the more successful skip tracing managers of any skip company in the country, I would say, from the feedback I get from the people that deal with her. But they hired Lee McCarty, who had basically transformed Ally Financial from a 300-branch operation down to a 3-branch operation, 3 large national call centers. And the plan was to do it with 30, and I think partway through the plan, Lee said, we don't need 30, we can do it with 3. And they ended up, he was part of a team of people, 3 people, I think, that basically transformed the industry. But you can share a little bit with that.
You summarized it pretty close. But my background, I was one of the guys that raised the hand when questions asked if you ever been out to possess some cars. That's where I started with GMAC back in 1985. And my experience over the next 30 years with GMAC and then Ally Financial was just an ongoing learning process in terms of how you ultimately go out and find somebody. And I think about what we used to do back in 1985. I was in Montana and Wyoming. That was my field territory. And so it was a very rural area. It was in Wyoming, it was primarily roughneck oil country, so very transient sort of people in terms of their lifestyle. And then up in Montana, of course, very rural and a couple of Native American reservations. And I think about the data that we have at our fingertips today versus what we had back then. Back then we had a name, post office box, maybe a phone number, and maybe a relative. And it was really all that data gathering was out in the field, knocking on doors, talking to people, talking to neighbors, things that you probably couldn't get away with today, even though we didn't break the rules back then. But it's quite amazing how the industry has evolved and how data, predictive analytics, artificial intelligence really is going to be the key to your success longer term.
There's nobody who I think doesn't agree with that. When you Google Cancun, and for the next 3 weeks, every single thing possible about Cancun is in your inbox, or you're being spammed, or you're even now being phone called in some cases. So it's really interesting. So that's really kind of the history of Intelligence and kind of where we've gotten to and where we've come. And what we'd really like to try to do now is turn it over to the team and let them talk through each of the components of this core of products that we've built. So security is not a product, but if you don't have security, you can't get in the game.
I mean, you just cannot even have your software used if you don't have security. And as I mentioned in the video, one of the larger financial institutions came to us and said, we need to ramp up your security level because we've already audited, we have 85 vendors, we've audited 6, and 5 of the 6 have failed the audit. So we need to be able to see if you can get through this if we're going to have PII in your system, and we want to see if your system can be used by the vendors that are failing, because we don't want to lose the vendor, but it's just their software can't pass. Because they did what a lot of collection agencies and a lot of places did in the beginning. They wrote their own software, but they have one developer. They don't have all of the different infrastructure that Michelle can tell you she goes through all the time in regards to compliance and security, and Alex will share in a second. And then compliance obviously is something that we all know from the CFPB we have to have. Integrations, we really felt that was critical to not copy and paste and go through all the data. Predictive analytics is something that we just thought, hey, the people are talking about this, it's interesting. We didn't really think about predictive analytics too much, but you saw the speech I made back in 2011. We were talking about geotags on pictures and being able to drive data for a higher right party contact. Workflow is important because you don't want people deciding what to do. And Brian will talk a little bit about the difference between intuition and intelligence and artificial intelligence. And now the big buzzword is artificial intuition, because intuition is the smartest thing you can have. It's better than any computer because it's your brain. Your brain's the smartest computer there ever was. But the problem is that it's your brain. There's all these different distractions in there. A computer doesn't get distracted, X's and O's. So if you can build artificial intuition, then I think you're really onto something. And then vendor management is critical through some of our partners that have integrations with the different vendors out in the field. And if we can make it all work, that works well. So with that, Alex Jang.
Hi guys. I am so sorry, I didn't even introduce myself. My name is Alex Jang. I'm the logistics coordinator at Intelligis. I've worked with a few of you guys with contracts and maybe some billing, but I do hope to work a lot more closely with everyone in the future. And one of the things that I was so honored to be able to be involved with Intelligis is the security. I've worked with our Chief Information Security Officer. I've worked with Michelle, who is our Security and Compliance Officer as well. And I've learned so much. And what I want to do is just start with where we were. Can I get the next slide? This is where the app comes into play. If you guys have the app, we just really want to know, in your opinion, why is customer data becoming, or in your opinion, why is customer data becoming more and more protected? Why is that important? Why do we care about that? If you guys have the app, feel free to take a moment. I'm going to continue with the presentation, but in the past, something that I didn't really get to experience just because I'm so new to the industry, but based off of the stories that I've heard and just what was shared, files would be just sent, printed out, sent to someone's car and worked. That was the idea of security, is trusting one another. It was a security manual, one-page policy, one-day audit that was conducted, and we said that we are secure, we lock our doors, we keep the papers shredded, but that was it. Phones weren't as securely audited. Our doors and our computers probably weren't locked, or we weren't changing our passwords as often, or if there is anyone out there that might have a piece of paper with their password still securely tucked under their keyboard, probably not the best thing to do. Can you go to the next slide for me, please?
I'll say a place to answer.
Oh.
I just say a place to ask.
Ooh.
We're working on that.
We're good at predictive analytics, we're just not good at apps to answer questions at conferences.
Let the developer at home.
But Mark, you're a golfer, so being the first person to answer the question to speak out is an awesome trick golf.
Well, and since we don't have that open, does anyone care to share right now? And if anyone's not too afraid to say why why it's becoming more and more protected. Does anyone want to share? Mark, anything? He's looking at the gift.
I would think from the perspective of if your data's not protected, your data's accessed, and it becomes public, there's a significant impact to your brand reputation, financial impacts. We've
So Dave, question for you. That's Dave Bowen. You head up all of the auto finance relationships for TransUnion. What's been the impact to your company? As you're doing your budgets for next year, as you're looking at where you're going, what are you seeing from that level? And what do you see as a large data provider?
Yes, that's a fair question, given the environment we're in today. And I would tell you that from a credit reporting perspective and alternative data perspective, we've always been very cautious about how we manage data, from a brand reputation perspective as well as regulatory. That said, we recognize, I think, as all of my competitors do, that thousands of times a day people are trying to get into our systems. So security isn't new. It's something we spend a significant portion of money on. I'm suggesting it'll probably become a larger portion next year, simply because of what is anticipated to be the overreach from Washington. For every action, there's usually not an equal reaction, there's an overreaction.
Yeah.
So I would expect to hear from our regulatory bodies, and maybe not just us, but anybody in the financial services industry. So we're being very proactive. We're anticipating more scrutiny, and we're spending a ton more money on top of what was already a ton of money.
Exactly. Brett, I'm guessing you're probably going to have the best security of anybody next year. And you work for Equifax. Exactly. And that could happen to anybody in this room. And they are our #1 data provider. More right party contacts from Equifax. No disrespect to anybody else in the room, but you get more right party contacts from Equifax data and masterQueue than any other data provider. Hands down, consistent across all different levels from early stage to deep stage. So it's a tough pill to swallow. I'm sure you've seen your organization change a lot just in the last month, right?
Yes, it's been rapid, and there's been a ton of changes.
Yeah, and I think, Dave, you're right. The government is the government likes to get in wherever they can, and they were maybe figuring they were saturated on some of the debt collection stuff, so now they got a chance to go after you guys. So that's going to be interesting.
So does anyone else really cringe when they think of security sometimes, and just how many policies and regulations and procedures that you have to put in place? One of my responsibilities also is making sure that everyone's USB drives and CD drives are actually disabled. And it's really funny because when you hire millennials and young people, they don't really know what a disk drive is or anything like that. They don't use that, so it's almost as if that eventually will become obsolete, and that's why we're always increasing our knowledge and increasing our way of keeping security or our data secure, because there's different ways, not just CD drives, not just USB drives, that people are getting that information. Can I go to the next slide?
Alex, what was funny is we put out cell phone holders on your tables. And Michelle looked at Alex, and the consensus was?
Right, so cell phone holders, please take them home. Don't put them on your work desks. Great tools to keep you entertained, but probably not in compliance with your IT department or security. Just keep that in mind. We're not encouraging any of that kind of behavior. So, B word. Something that I learned right off the bat is don't say the B word. Can anyone guess what the B word might be when we're talking about security?
masterQueue lava lamp.
Correct. Scary word. You hear it, and you're just like, ooh, who was it? It wasn't me. A breach can be easily defined as confidential, secure, protected data that can be accessed, used, or taken by anyone that's unauthorized. So even viewed, right? So if I can go to the next slide. Information is becoming so much more easily available in high volumes. And that's what we want, right? In this industry, we want as much data to process through and churn through, and we want to churn through it faster. But what that does is it puts us in a higher risk. It puts us in a higher risk for vulnerability and attacks. And we want to get our CSRs the best data. We want to get them the most. We want to get to those results quickly, but our audits, they're getting tougher. they're getting longer. They are more meticulous about the specific details that you are actually protecting the customer and client data, their consumers, so that they can have the confidence, so that banks can have the confidence to tell their clients and their customers that, don't worry, you are safe with us. And they need to make sure that that downstream, that's the same thing. And the goal, right, is to combine security and also productivity. We can't tighten security so much that we can't produce, we can't move forward, we can't actually do our jobs and get results. So I found this on the Data Breach Index website, and malware and hackers get a lot of attention for a lot of the data breaches that we experience. But one piece of data that's really surprising is that accidental loss, while it's only 18% of incidents, 86% of actual data that has been taken came from accidental loss. And that comes down to what practices are we actually using internally to keep client and customer data secure. It's really something that we can put a lot of products and policies behind ensuring that outsiders don't get to our data, and we're doing that at masterQueue, and we're doing that with all of our other co-sponsors and vendors and integrators. But you can only do so much if your internal policies also aren't in alignment with it. Next slide. So the best practices that I would like to share with everyone is very, very quick and easy. So consider something that you can teach to others is consider that data as if it's your own. We're exposed to so much of it, we might be numb, and it might not seem so important because there's so many other PII and SSNs that are coming in at us, but consider that someone else is handling your data too, and you want to keep it as secure as possible. Lock your computer screens when you walk away. A data breach can come from anyone, internally, externally, and you want to make sure that that information is secure as possible. Be suspicious of any emails and links that you come across. It's so easy when we're working so fast to click, 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 and then there goes the accidental link or the accidental email that sends your company in for a headache of searching where that came from. And the last one is using masterQueue. masterQueue. It allows, we've integrated and implemented so many policies and products to ensure that work can actually be done in masterQueue. Things like masking SSNs, IP restricted access, password reset requirements. Any users of masterQueue in here love our password reset process. The CAPTCHAs, the requirement to update it every 90 days. The security questions required in order to actually reset your password. All of these processes that we've implemented is not just for fun. We don't like to just torture you. We just want to make sure that you are able to, that you are given access by your company to access all the data. The masterQueue connects you to multiple vendors and multiple pieces of information and streamlines it so quickly that you want to ensure that that access is really contained. And one fun piece of data that I found too is when I started in 2013, there wasn't that much in terms of security policies and procedures. And between then and now, we've grown those policies and procedures by 1,000%. It's gone almost, it makes your head spin. Has anyone else experienced that, just the gross number of increased policies and requirements and security audits?
We can't even fit the books on the table anymore. Now we have to go to a laptop, right?
Right, so now it's going into, you know.
Yeah.
Right, the binders are breaking.
What's the best policy so far that you've written? Pandemic? Active shooter? Those are fun to play out.
The zombie apocalypse, we did write that one, remember?
zombie apocalypse. What is that? What does zombie apocalypse mean?
We actually wrote a zombie apocalypse, and the best part of that was you only have to be faster than the slowest runner in the office.
Jesus. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's physical security, it's data security, it's on steroids. Pandemic testing plan. I mean, the good thing is we, yeah.
The proactive pandemic, I think.
I mean, we were like, I had to look up the word. And then after I did and figured out what it was, I'm like, okay, we have a disaster recovery. We have 2 sites. Let's have a Michelle just got back from vacation in Puerto Rico, and she has a pandemic episode that she just got a phone call on, and now the whole office has to be quarantined, and we have to go into our disaster recovery, and we videotaped it all, and when they come in and they say, let's see your pandemic testing plan, we show them the video. I mean, it's just nuts what you have to do, right? But it's the difference. If you're not doing that, and obviously Dave, with what you said, and Brett, what you guys are realizing, you got the government coming after you probably pretty quick. So, there's no room to spare. So it's good.
Okay, so this is just the average days for on-site audits, but how many people are actually preparing for audits and the on-sites 6, maybe 9, 12 months in advance, talking to the client, giving them the document, making sure that it's there, giving the proof, all so that you can prepare for another week in-person audit to actually show them the proof and the document that you actually have it and that you're actually implementing it. We are so tightened with all the regulations and fear for that, losing any sort of data or any room for any data to leave, that you have to do it in a very smart and intelligent way to where it doesn't impede productivity and your business. And that's why it really requires really hardworking people that understand and know the industry, know where it's going, collaborate. That's why we're here, collaborating with one another, looking forward and looking out to what is coming next. Go to the next slide. There we go. Oh, thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm one of the software trainers and account managers and support staff at masterQueue. I'm relatively new to the industry. Most of you guys, it looks like, have been in the industry as long or longer than I've been alive, so kudos to that. And I appreciate you taking the time to listen to us today. As you can tell by my little quote under compliance, I do have a bit of a dry sense of humor, so if you don't get the jokes, that's okay. They're just meant for the people who think like I do. But I did want to talk about compliance, but before I do that, I want to play a little game with you guys. I very much like games that are interactive. You don't even have to stand up for this one, but we're going to test your compliance. And to do this game, I'm going to have to sit down the microphone. So all I want you guys to do is to do exactly what I say. All right? Simple game. All right, go ahead and touch your forehead. Touch your nose. Touch your ear. Touch your lips. Touch your elbow. It's a fun game, right? Yeah, and some of you guys are like, yeah, I totally touched my elbow. I was right on it. Others of you were more concerned with looking at me and doing that. It just speaks to what type of person you are. Are you a visual learner? Are you a kinesthetic? Are you an auditory learner? And how do you take in the world? Now, compliance means different things to different individuals. An interesting thing, I was talking with our development guys kind of about compliance and somewhat with security as well, and we were talking about, you know, where do so many of our issues come from, and they actually come from those who've been in the industry forever. The longer we spend in the industry, the longer we spend at our computers in a particular software, the more likely I am to get up from my desk and not lock my computer. Why? Because the other 100 times that I got up, no one stole the data. You know, no one said anything the 100 times that I called this guy 40 times a day. And so I'm more likely to push the envelope the longer I am in the industry, the longer I get away with stuff, the less compliant I become. So it's important to be cognizant of that and to think about, am I doing any of those practices? Because
moving forward, it's only going to get more stringent. So Sean, if we can start going through the slides a little bit. Just briefly, these are currently the regulatory compliance acts that exist. How many of you guys have read through all of these acts? Yeah. Michelle. They're long, really long. A lot of them are several hundred pages long with appendices added and subsections and updates coming through on the acts for clarification. So when you look at all that, it's really difficult to stay in compliance unless you have a compliance officer that's going through and actually reading all of these things and making sure that every little dot is checked, every I is dotted, every T is crossed. And that's where the industry is headed. These are just some of the general topics that we have to deal with on a daily basis, you guys have to deal with on a daily basis, and it's only going further down the line. So if it started off with just the lien holders, just the financial institutions, it's now with third-party vendors. It's now with the vendors that we contract with, and it's just going to keep going to make sure that there are no holes in the security policies and in the way that people are treating their compliance issues.
I think I would add one thing to that too that's great is that a lot of the stuff up there is repossession. So we're not a repossession assignment software. We have a lot of the tools we integrate with the repossession assignment softwares, but we're able to leverage our partners and be able to get some of the benefits that they have of checking to make sure condition reports are done all the way down to the vendor level, this, that, whatever it is. That helps a lot when because you can't do everything as one system. But if you integrate with multiple systems, then it gives you opportunities to get a lot of those things done that need to be done. That's one of the lifts we've been able to see.
Right. So when we have all these acts, when we have all these constraints, compliance is starting to feel in the industry a little bit more like constriction. And not without cause, not without reason, but it is something that we need to be aware of, that it's not going to be something that goes away, not gets looser. You guys know that, but it's important to think about it in terms of how are we going to manage that feeling, because it's not going to go away. Sean. So we want to look at how can we better navigate the different compliance issues that we see in the industry today. And with the FDCPA, I'm going to turn it over to John actually, and a little bit of talking about the 804 subsection 3 rule as it was written in 1977. I was not alive in 1977, so I'm going to let John speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one. Pull data, and you obviously got to call the subject first. That's what it's all about. You want to reach your customer and talk to your customer. But at the point you're unable to reach your customer, and it's not your eyes, it's the automation of the slideshow that didn't quite go through, so there's a little bit of blurry stuff on there. So, but you try to reach the customer through the subject numbers that you get from an Equifax or TransUnion, Experian are typically the three main sources. Other data providers help you as well. But when you can't, now you have to try to reach other people that are associated, related, could be the landlord, could be the place of employment, what have you. And there's so many rules, and 804.3 specifically says that if you call someone other than the subject for location purpose information, if you talk to that person, you're not allowed to call them back unless you believe they have reasonable knowledge as to the location of the person. So the question is, what is reasonable knowledge and how do you document that? So if you call and talk to the brother and the brother says, yeah, I think I could probably get a message to him, give me a call back in a couple days. You don't have to put a do not call on that because you have a call recording of the brother saying, yes, I can get a message to him, and I believe if I call him back in 3 days, he's going to have that information. Now that everything's recorded, really is important to train your people on what they do and don't mark do not call. The more conservative approach is talk to the person one time and never talk to them again. And a lot of lenders or skip companies or whoever are taking that approach just because they want to be as conservative as possible and not leave it up to the person who's making the calls. But I think it's really important to be able to have your software be able to do the same thing as well, to where when you call a number for, if you're looking for me and you call my brother Bob, and my brother says, hey, look, I haven't talked to him in a long time and I don't want to talk to him, which hopefully he's not going to say, but if he said that, then you would want to block every number for Bob Lewis from day 30 to day 60 to day 90, and then it goes out to the skip tracing vendor, and eventually ends up with the collection vendor, the repossession vendor, the debt buyer. Every single one of those people, if they're not buying data in the same system, and if they're not all tracking that name and that rule, and the phone numbers that are associated with that person, you have risk. And that's exactly what the proposed CFPB rules that Mark and I chatted with last year about, that they've been having such a tough time enacting, because they realized, they said, oh, it'll just be a software thing. We'll just connect all the softwares and then we'll know who everybody's calling. Well, it's not that simple to do. And it's going to be really interesting if they push that rule, because it's challenging if you're working in multiple softwares, if they're not all integrated. And even if they are integrated, how can you actually know what numbers were called? So it becomes really a challenging issue.
So does anyone outside of masterQueue have a system they use to keep track of calls? And I don't know if the app is working, so this may just be, we do this, we use a spreadsheet, we have a homegrown system that keeps track of our calls. Anyone? Okay, just curious. And the second question is more of an internal question. If you or your vendors are making calls, do they all know the rules? And I mean all the rules. In thinking about a state like Oregon, which, if we go to the next slide. A state like Oregon has a one-time only call rule on third parties. So if it's a
Place
third...
of employment, yeah.
Yeah. So if you have that call rule, that's great. How do we manage that? I don't know every area code in Oregon. And chances are your employees don't either, or your vendors don't either. So it's important to have a system in place in order to manage that, to make sure that down the line, that like John said, it's not getting called at every single point on the train tracks that it stops to have someone work the account. Because ultimately we want to stay in compliance in order to avoid more regulatory oversight or fines associated with that in the future. So kind of a new feature for us is actually the idea of custom do not calls based on area code or state. And where that really came into play is this year when we started getting massive requests for holds as Hurricane Harvey made its way into Texas. And we kind of said, hey, we can do that. Like, we can just say, you know what, let's take any phone number in any of the area codes in Texas and say they're dealing with enough stuff right now, all their repossessions are on hold, we're not going to bother them because they're trying to save their lives and they shouldn't be bothered with repossession right now. And that was something that a lot of lien holders decided to do. Same thing happened with Irma in Florida, and we have several companies we work with in Florida who had to shut down themselves just to make sure no one was injured. So
that was really interesting too, because it happened Harvey happened over the weekend. So all the lenders came in on Monday, and it was, don't make any phone calls to Houston. And then one lender said, don't make any phone calls to anyone in the state of Texas. And then another lender said, don't make any phone calls to anyone in the state of Louisiana. So pretty much everybody followed suit on that, because obviously it wasn't just what happened in Houston, it was what happened to the whole state, the whole surrounding area, because everybody was scrambling to help them, and it was a disaster, obviously. Then the question was, how are they going to pull back on that? Are they going to pull back by zip codes, by area codes? So we had to go in and write this code that would basically allow the lenders that were using the system to be able to say, here's the geographic range by zip code, here's the area codes, we want to be as conservative as possible. So the guy has a cell phone in Houston, but we're sure he lives in California, but I don't want to take a chance. So we have all of that built in, and we built a lot of it custom when Harvey hit, and then it really helped a lot when Irma hit quickly after that. So it's just being able to understand those scenarios. A lot of times you don't think about that until it happens. We all know hurricanes. We've always had a button you can push and put repos on hold through iRepo or whatever it is, but what we haven't had is that whole calling feature, the dynamics of by zip code, by area code, push a button, and it just shuts everything down. So I think that was really important.
yeah, Sean. Anyone get this reference? Okay, yeah, a couple people similar age to me at least. All right. TLC is a group that sang a song called No Scrubs. I won't play it for you, but we do want scrubs, right? We want scrubs to stay in compliance. They save us tons of time. If you have to go in and manually check every single account for a bankruptcy or a military, active military duty status, like that eats up so much time. So phone scrubs, even if it comes down to just checking caller IDs and making sure that a caller ID matches the name on the phone number. Man, I want to call that phone. That's a good phone number for me, especially if it's a recent phone number. I'm going to call that phone as a skip tracer or anyone trying to get in touch with the debtor. So another issue can be that if you don't have a system for identifying where the phone number is linked to, it can be difficult to know where are you calling. I don't know the area codes in Montana. So am I calling a Montana phone number even though I'm in Florida and it's 7 o'clock my time, but it's 5 o'clock in Montana and I'm breaking compliance regulations by calling them? It's important to have a system, whether it's automatically in your dialer or in your system of record or in masterQueue, that identifies those area codes of the phone numbers. Now, granted, could I have a California phone and be living in Florida? Absolutely. But there's really no way to ever tell that. We have to go based off of where the area codes are. So keeping track of those, that's going to be something that's more strictly enforced, I believe, in the future. And then looking forward into how do we keep track of the lien itself? If you're the lien holder, are you still the lien holder? Has the title changed through some facet you're unaware of? There's no point in working the account if you're not going to be the lien, if you're not the lien holder and you can no longer collect on that debt. So saving time by not working dead-end accounts from the beginning. And this is where I'll introduce Carfax. Sorry, that's Carfax's slide. And I was like, I didn't put that slide in there. So Chris, I'm going to introduce Chris from Carfax. He's going to come up and speak a little bit about vehicle history and lien data that they provide. So,
Chris.
Thanks to all of our, we had several sponsors who sponsored lunch, so we'll be bringing 11. Thank you all for doing that, and we value all of our relationships with you as we do with Carfax data.
Yep. Well, thank you. Yeah, just going to talk real quickly about the vehicle data. We are part of, Ian and I are part of the Carfax Banking and Insurance Group, which is big. A little history on Carfax. I think everybody knows us from the vehicle history reports. Went out to the consumers. Consumers had them, used them. Dealers all of a sudden said, gosh, the consumers have all this information about these vehicles that we don't have, and we're selling the vehicles. We ought to have this information. And then we started the dealer business unit. And then after a while, the banks and financial institutions came on and said, well, gosh, the customers and the dealers have all this vehicle information, and we're lending out the money on these things. We ought to know about these cars. So that's kind of how our division evolved within Carfax. As we talked about before, talking about lien holder data and moving around, probably the best way to find out about where the cars are is through the DMVs, and we have a relationship with all 50 states with the DMV, so we will know when they move. Obviously, you're going to have the date in there as well, when the lien was put on the car, and obviously when it shows bottom was released down here. I know with credit unions, it's a big issue. A lot of them do not have liens on their vehicles. We talked to one of our customers. They had a couple $1 million in cars out on the street that they didn't have titles for. So they really needed that information from us to find out if there was still in effect a lien on it because they didn't have one, and then what state was it in so they could then follow up. And again, that's determining the location. We'll talk about it. I think there's another slide a little bit later, but oftentimes too, our data is probably 70% proprietary and 30% public. One of the things we're finding now is, while this is great with the DMVs, it's about a week and a half after Harvey, and we found a car with a perfectly clean title in Montana that had been a total loss in the Harvey damage. and DMVs are not finding out about it for a long time. We have the relationship with the insurance companies, service departments, oil change companies, et cetera, to where we get that private information that the DMV is way behind on. But nonetheless, that is the backbone of the information is from the DMV. So.
One of the things we noticed too is that, we had a lender who goes out and gets a Carfax report. It's part of their process, but if the person's sick, sometimes it doesn't happen. So it wasn't always happening. So first thing we did is we wrote an interface, we automated their data to come in. Their data comes in a PDF. So instead of the person logging into the website, pulling down a PDF and saving it to their loan servicing system as documentation that they looked at it, and then reading a multiple page report to see, are there new phone numbers? Was the airbag deployed? 4 or 5 different things that for a variety of different reasons make sense to someone in collections, skip, or repo. They're able to have it right there on the screen. Saved a lot of time from logging in, made sure that it happened on every account, but there's a next step that we want to do. So we want to challenge all of our partners too, and one of the challenges that we've talked about, I think with some of the people at your place, is we really need the data digitized. Mm-hmm. We need to have that data not as a PDF. That's great, it saves time, it's faster. But if we could actually get the phone numbers as line items, if we can get the address for registration if you have that, or as the airbag deployed, now we can put alerts on it. Because why have the person spend the time to even look at your data if there's nothing in there that's relevant? Because it's just a waste of time. It's like, get the report, yes, if there's something there, the system will tell you to look at it. If there's not, you did it, check the box, compliance was done, step was done, and that's really important as we move forward in what we're all doing here in terms of data, is to be able to digitize all that. So it's great that we got the deal, and now we just want to take it to the next step, and I think you'll meet Lance in a second, who you probably should talk to because he's figured that part out, and he can help you with that, because it's really good technology, what they've done, taking these PDFs and digitizing them.
Well, and that's how we got introduced to John and masterQueue. We had a large national lender who's a customer of both of ours. And I think we have a great website, very intuitive, easy to use. But to John's point, their collectors were in masterQueue searching, and then have to get out and get into our website. And gosh, they went to John, I think. Well, he came to both of us, I think, at the same time and said, guys, you guys got to get together and get into masterQueue. And that's ultimately what we did, and they're finding it much easier. And as we were having a demo out there, and Sean automatically, everything that goes into their skip department, they automatically, first thing to do is pull a Carfax report. So Sean was able to get into masterQueue and automatically pull. Whenever it dropped into that queue, they immediately pulled a report. So it automated it for them, and it made it much easier, and obviously there's more steps to go.
Yeah, and we're all learning too, right? I'm not bagging on you guys because you have great data, you're Carfax, right? I mean, but what's interesting is that, we're still sending files, we're still doing spreadsheets, we're still doing things that the regulators, when they actually really get involved, they're going to say, are you kidding me? This is 2017. Everything should be going through a real-time bidirectional interface. And hopefully when you're adding resources to your companies, those resources are not just security, but part of security to be able to enhance technology to make it easier to use all these tools, to make it easier for everybody how you can really use great data. I mean, you guys spend a lot of time and money gathering that data. It's so important to know the airbag was deployed. It's so important to know they got a smog check in Tennessee and you thought he was in Florida. I mean, or California, even worse. So that's really, everything is a little step. And every time you have all that data step by step, it just makes the process easier from early stage collections all the way through debt recovery. So great, appreciate it, thank you.
Thanks.
So I know we do military, we talked about military data, and spoke about Lance. And so Lance is a very interesting company. He's one of our sponsors today. He's going to come up and chat just a little bit about not just the data that they're pulling, because different than Carfax, where Carfax is going out and aggregating all the data. So there's really kind of 2 different types of data providers. There's an aggregator of data who gathers data from multiple sources, like a LexisNexis or like a Carfax. There's kind of the source of the data, which would be like an Experian, TransUnion, Equifax, where really the credit information becomes the source. And then there's a company like Bankruptcy Watch. Come on up, Lance. There's a company like Bankruptcy Watch that looks at it from a different perspective, from a technology perspective, and says, how can we take this existing process and make it simpler? So the podium's up here, and if you want to chat for a second, great.
Song? Check. Okay, so this is Andrew from Bankruptcy Watch.
Andrew, sorry,
CEO.
Lance.
Yep. Yeah, I am. I'm also, let's see, that'll probably
Oh, you're great. You're great. I know what it says up there. I'm here today. I missed John. I missed you on my last route through, so I hope to catch you next time. When we met John a number of months ago, John was the fastest person I've ever met to grasp exactly the value of what we were doing. So kudos over the many years. It's been great. I am the co-founder of Bankruptcy Watch. I'm also an attorney. The company essentially started when I was studying back in 1996, 1997 at UC Berkeley Law School, and I had a buddy who was the kind of guy who would memorize all the page numbers and associate with the quotes and then point it out to the professor. It was such a blast to work with this guy that I just thought, oh, I want to keep on working with him. So he was also getting a PhD in mathematics at the same time at Berkeley, and then he decided that he would drop out, become a computer programmer. I went into corporate law, hated it, bored to death because everything was non-systematic. We combined together again in about 2002, work on projects with HSBC, et cetera, and then with LexisNexis. And I go to LexisNexis's headquarters, and I tell them that they're missing some data. And we meet with the CEO, and there's a lot of excitement about it. I've been working on this project ever since. Today's a big announcement I'm going to release today here for the first time, which is why I wanted to do the presentation. It is something that has never been done in the history of the world, and it is something that I would compare to, and this is going to be a religious comment, so I'll put both out here. I really wanted to bring both a grail and a chalice, like a pimp's chalice and a holy grail, right? So I didn't offend anybody, or I don't know how exactly that works. Because up until now, there is massive amounts of data, troves of data, and it's locked away in the PACER system. How many people here know what PACER is? Everybody here, right? Okay. I loved what John alluded to right away, which was it has PDFs, and PDFs are messy. We're in a post-paper world, right?
Right.
No, because we have PDFs still. They just don't make sense to have. There's enormous, extremely valuable data locked away in these PDFs. I'm going to draw equivalency here because this is key to creating value for all of us. A PDF is paper in digital form. So, and paper is equivalent to PACER for so much, probably 90% of the work that your staff are doing. They're digging in and finding paper in this massive, massive system, cabinetry of files. What we have done, we are the only company who have done this. It is patent pending, and it is the ability to parse PDFs that have been loaded to the PACER system. And I'm talking about the Holy Grail, which is the statements and schedules themselves. We can take all 80 pages of documents and in a matter of seconds, load all of those data points, over 400 unique data points, and make them immediately available to your staff in exactly the computer systems that you want, so that you can run the most complex computations that have ever been seen. Now, sometimes this is done manually in Pakistan. Okay, we know because we have developers in Pakistan, and they're familiar with this setup there. But it takes weeks, so the data is not readily available. So we can grab over 80 pages worth of this unique data. Why is the data valuable? There's two stages in life that are, we'll say, the key: death and birth. I love bankruptcy because it's so vital. It deals with both of them. Someone dies when they file bankruptcy, a financial death. You've got such great visibility. Do we have all three bureaus here? Equifax, TransUnion,
Two out of the three.
2 out of the 3. You guys have such great visibility right up to that bankruptcy filing. And then what happens? Every single contract is severed. You can't tell which ones they're going to keep, but what you know is that they're all gone. So you have this incredible visibility caused by our amazing capitalist system, and then boom, you lose visibility, which gives you a lot of opportunities, right? Whenever there's visibility lost to competitors, There's a lot of possibilities. So what we do is we look at that moment where all those contracts are severed, and we say, well, where's the data? It's locked in the 80-page PDF that's filed with the bankruptcy court. And here's the really nice part. That 80-page PDF is signed under penalty of perjury with the name of an attorney who is liable if that data was not properly researched and disclosed. He has his license, his livelihood on the line. There are 5 different levels of supervision for this data. There are 1 million of these documents filed per year now, which is a low point, and now it's gaining again. So you have that much data, that many opportunities where you're scurrying through paper and your formulas are not as accurate as they could be until now. And that's why we're so excited to do the integration with John. And we've had some of this data available before now, but this is the piece that we were working diligently on for years. And so I want to ask first, how many people know what changes on December 1st from a bankruptcy perspective? Anybody? It's a unique inflection point. If you watch bankruptcy like Bankruptcy Watch does, it's akin to the 2005 law changes that I think we all got knocked around by. Every single, for just the briefest moment in time, every single Chapter 13 bankruptcy plan in the country is supposed to be uniform and will be uniform. That's a big deal.
That's huge.
Yes. It's a big deal for 2 reasons. One, it's a big deal because your staff won't know how to deal with it. We have a certified bankruptcy specialist on staff, and he's writing to the judges in the Bay Area, where we have some offices, saying, please answer this and this. And the judge writes back, good question. He doesn't know the answer. He says, I'll get back to you. Nobody knows. It's like that. So your staff is definitely not going to know. This is a really trying time when you need to do compliance. It's a really trying time because you need to submit proofs of claims. And you need to submit them within 70 days of bankruptcy having been filed. We've watched a number of your companies fail to produce those as we watch the bankruptcy data and lose $10,000, $17,000, be beat by a debtor and lose $222,000 because that debtor beat you to the punch 3, 4, 5 different times to keep that house or that car. So imagine now that you've got this 70-day timeline change. Then you've got the Chapter 13 data that's totally changed, and it's got this unique inflection point, and then the judges will start weighing in and changing it like judges like to do as some impression of their ego. That happens on December 1st. And what we have on December 1st is the ability to parse the Chapter 13 plans for all of the different areas throughout the country.
So when you say parse the plans, what's the specific information in there in a data point that's important for the people that are following on that?
The amount that their payment is each month,
Yep.
the amounts that are going to be going to different creditors
Yep.
are the key pieces.
What about from a date standpoint? When you say missing dates? So there's the timeline that they have to follow or the timeline the lender has to follow, is correct?
Yes, yeah, definitely. And the filing of this case kicks off a number of different timelines, probably about 15 different timelines.
So why do the lenders miss the dates? Why are they letting these things expire? Why are they not catching them in time?
Yeah, that was actually an aside. I'm sure it caught some people's attention. The reason that they're missing it is because the process is incredibly complicated.
Manual too.
And it's very, very manual. Because what happens with the staff is they come in and they go through an email inbox and they go into Pacer and they download certain documents. And some of you guys have scrubs, notifications that come in, and congrats, it says, here's a bankruptcy, it's been filed.
Yeah.
So flag it and stop collections.
Yeah.
And that's a primitive but essential first step. And the process gets increasingly disorganized and manual from there very,
Sure.
very quickly.
So you've got different people in the room, from lenders to partners of ours with software to skip trace companies, users of our software too. And it kind of is relevant to all of them. So if you're a skip company and you do a bankruptcy scrub and the account comes back a positive bankruptcy, but the lender says, you know what, it's discharged, go ahead and repo the car. there's a bunch of information inside of that report, but you probably don't have a Pacer account. So what you do is you facilitate Pacer, whether it's through your account or through their account. So if it's a big bank, they have a Pacer account. You just use their login credentials through your system, digitize the data, and then once the data's digitized, it's like, all right, what's important from a collection standpoint? What's important from a filing standpoint? What's important from a skip tracing or repossession? Repossession is there a new place of employment? Is there a new address? Or maybe, maybe you're 55 steps down in the skip process and I want to call the guy's lawyer because I've tried everything else and I can't do it. So all of that now becomes points of data that you put workflow on to say, where does that data fit? That's what the value is, and that's the same value we talk about with Carfax, is that if you've patent pended that technology to take the PDF, you guys should definitely exchange cards, because he might be the answer to get you what's probably number 27 on the roadmap of development at Carfax, but you got people in the room who would love to have your data, and he might have the technology to be able to do it.
Sometimes I skip over the basics because I'm so excited about the new stuff, and I am in charge of the product development. Yes, we provide a real-time API, which is very unusual. You don't have to wait 3 days. You don't have to wait a day. You're getting the data poured directly into your bankruptcy systems, into your intelligence system, et cetera.
So let me ask you a quick question. So John Sullivan, if I can ask you, because I know that you, and I know you can't talk about specifics, but there's a certain process in collections that late-stage collectors go through. Can you just, for the rest of the room, so we all can understand what that's like, explain a couple of those steps? Your people they have to first see if it's in bankruptcy, yes or no. If it is, it goes to a specialist that handles bankruptcy. So, and that's a manual process for you guys right now. And you have a couple different solutions. You either go directly to Pacer or you go to other partners of yours that bring that data in, but it's still a PDF and it's still manual. So that's where it becomes interesting, to where if we can, once we build our interface, which I think is on the roadmap here pretty quick, then, whether it's Jimmy or Victory Recovery or whoever is in the room that has a need for this type of data, it just becomes one more piece of information and one more source.
So we pull all the data in, we can then e-file the proofs of claims, et cetera. This is a really hot area. As some of you may know, Verisk recently bought LCI for $151 million. And I think that purchase was largely because of the need for the automation and also because of the predictive analytics that are associated with the bankruptcy data. Now, LCI cannot get this bankruptcy data out of the statements and schedules. And we can. And this data is incredibly powerful for originating, for those of you who are involved in that part, and also for the other parts in terms of servicing, so that your staff can come in the morning and have all of their paper already been read, already been loaded right into the system that you want, and already have done predictive analytics. And we use quite a bit of artificial intelligence in order to determine how to parse the PDFs, which numbers appropriately match the Chapter 13s and the Chapter 13 data. And it will also help your staff as these law changes happen, because then you're not reading the forms and dealing with the data. You're just dealing with the data. In your own system, it's a much safer, more hygienic environment. Really excited to make that. I know it's probably a bigger deal when your life is watching bankruptcy.
Thanks a lot, Ed.
But it feels like a great room to do it.
Great. Thanks a lot. Yeah, no problem. So I know we have a couple questions, and what I want to do is go through a couple questions and we'll take a break. And we'll come back and talk about predictive analytics and integrations. So I think that Jared can throw these out, and we'll do our best.
For those of you guys that don't know me, my name is Jared. You probably received a couple emails from me at some point in the last couple months trying to get you all here. So I appreciate everyone showing up. First question we got is coming from Craig from PricewaterhouseCoopers. He's in the back. When is the right time to start buying location data on an account? Delinquency status, unsuccessful attempts to reach current contact info, etc.
That sounds like a question Jeremiah wants to answer.
Well, I mean, we have a variety of lenders from very, very small all the way up to the largest ones out there. They tend to buy data at different times, but in my opinion, when the best time to buy location-related data and analytics and analyze it against all of your other data, including public records data and everything else that's funneled into masterQueue, is 30 to 45 days past due. We're seeing more and more lenders start to use the data analytics and scoring earlier and earlier to stop the normal, the cyclical process that just continues to go through, what you've always done, so to speak. I know people make changes and things to try to curb the collection rates, but at the end of the day, it's about not doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. So we have more and more lenders using it earlier and earlier to either assign a risk indicator that's higher than you would not really know about without the location data and analytics, and then either fast forward that process to a point of repossession assignment earlier in cycle, because I think wherever you work with subprime debt, you have the professional debtors out there that get used to knowing when the calls start, when the repo truck starts, when everything starts. And if you can catch them 10 days or 15 days earlier off guard because they're 250 miles away from where you think they are, where you would assign a door knock company or a repossession agent, it produces much higher results and it will change your loss curve. So, I think the earlier the better, at least to start analyzing it, not necessarily saying, that you need to take action, but we even have lenders now that are, looking at the data and saying, you see this car all the time. You've seen it 100 times over the last 90 days. So we know for a fact when we assign that car to a repossession, it will get picked up within a very short time period because it's just continually at the same two spots, home and work. And so let's delay recovery assignment for another 10 days or 15 days, give it to our best set of collectors to see if we can try to get the money, keep the customer in the car. There's different strategies out there, but I think, the earlier the better to really start using the analytics piece more so than
Yeah. And I think, we're doing a live stream. We've got 100 and something people watching this thing, and this is the first time we've ever done this before, so we're not showing you guys, we're just showing us, so it's probably hard for some of the people out there to hear. But basically, Jeremiah does LPR data, and they've got the largest LPR database in the country with DRN, and today we announced our integration with them, and one of the things that he mentioned is earlier is better. And I think that's really the message that we've learned. We set out to build this awesome skip tracing product because that's what we did. We were late stage. You can't find anybody. Give it to us and we'll find it. We'll find anybody. And you really can find anybody if you try hard enough. But when you start looking at volume, it changes the game a lot. But when you really start analyzing, start talking to people who have lived in the earlier stage world and they look at what we're doing, then they start to say, why are we waiting? There's a blog on our website called Collections is a Race Against Time that was written by Bill Plug, who had a huge involvement in early stage collections for a number of years at one of the largest banks in the country. And he looked at masterQueue, and one of the things he said was, you really need to almost try to skip the skip tracing process. You need to bring a ton of data in, and you need to make a lot of phone calls and be able to really see how you can utilize the data that's available before the guy goes 2 payments late, and before especially he goes 3 payments late. And a lot of times the lenders will wait until it's too late, and you look at the work that they've done, and they really haven't made that much of an effort. And if you can look at the history of the account and look at the probability the person's going to pay and look at the risk and look at the balance and what the car would bring at auction and all the different factors, then you should be making decisions on how much effort do you want to put into the account. If the guy's 21 years old and lives on an Indian reservation and has no relatives, no neighbors, nobody to talk to, then that can be a little bit more of a challenging account because there's not that many data pieces that are out there. So you might have to put more effort into it early on than you would waiting till it's 90 days late and hoping you're going to stop the charge-off. Great question, Craig. Thank you. And for everybody who asks the questions, we'll give you guys a chance to come up at the end and grab a little gift up here that we have. Is there another one, Jared?
Yeah, we got a few coming in. We'll just kind of work through them. This one's from Sandra. you're on in the back. Does Carfax give you power sports data? Chris, I think you might be able to.
Does Carfax give you power sports data? Okay.
Yeah.
We, sometimes, depends on where they went to get their work done. They went to a dealership or a Midas or a Dookie or whatever that we have signed up, yes. But it's not all inclusive. We're primarily passenger vehicles. We have some motorcycles, we have some RVs, we have some, power sports, this or that, but it's not as all inclusive as the personal vehicles are. So, a little, not much.
Great. So I think at this point, we're going to go ahead and take a break. So it's 10:30. So if we come back in about 10:45, we'll see you guys in a little bit.
Restrooms, if you guys aren't sure, are down to the right.
I think you gotta get people out, because I feel like they've been sitting for.
Yeah, you're right.
I think, yeah, for me, AI, like, so much of the time, you guys know what I have. I just really do. It's a lot easier. Like,
what it is. I'm just like,
sorry. All right, as we're wrapping up the conversations, we just want to keep on somewhat of a timeline so we can allow everyone to get to the conference that starts at noon on time.
There's, hey, you guys, we'll start in a couple minutes. There's lunches that are by the door, and we're going to power right through and try to get out of here early. So if you want to grab lunch and just have it at your chair or table, that'd be great. Yeah, so once again, if you guys want to grab lunch, that's probably a good idea to bring to your chairs, and then we'll get started in a minute. So on the application, if you put your name in, then we'll know who's asking the question. That could be a good thing or a bad thing, but then you get to come up and there's like a little cocktail kit to make an old fashioned at 30,000 feet. There's a branding iron to brand your steaks when you barbecue. There's lava lamps. There's some kind of cool stuff up here. Or you can raise your hand and ask a question in between each session. We'll do that. So it looks like, I guess one sign is most of the people came back, so it must not be too bad. So that's good. We're doing all right.
The food helps.
All right, so I think that one thing's very clear about masterQueue, and that's we're very serious about our integrations. I mean, we have more integrations than anybody else in the industry, whether it's data providers, mainstream or unique, skip tracing tools, VoIP systems, pretty much anything that we can consolidate into one system to make your guys' life as a masterQueue user more simple. So what is an integration really? An integration is paying a developer to link multiple systems because you're too lazy to log into multiple systems every day. Going into Equifax to buy data, going into TransUnion to buy data, DRN to buy data, making phone calls. The more that we can link those systems and consolidate them into a single platform for you guys to log into, makes your guys' life way easier. So, as masterQueue, we're always on the lookout for more integrations, things that are going to make your guys' experience better. So I know you're eating. We can probably release the question, just answer when you guys get to it, but we want to know, as a user or as a potential user, as a partner, what do you guys see being where should we focus our direction on interfaces? What's going to make your guys' experience better? So is it going to be more data providers, consolidating more places, more platforms into one system, more VoIP options as far as making phone calls, text messaging, emails, things like that out of masterQueue? Real-time interfaces into core systems for the skip companies in here is probably not so important, but for the lenders, that's definitely an option. And then post-repo transport auction, stuff like that, into masterQueue. So when you guys get to it, go ahead and answer that question through the app, and then we'll maybe look at the results a little bit later.
One thing real quick too is when you talk about VoIP options, we partnered with a company called BellsLink out of Colorado, and probably one of the more intuitive companies in regards to pushing the envelope on what you can do in terms of compliant telephony integrated with data. And some of the things that our users here who use masterQueue with BellsLink already realize, and I think you'll see some more things coming from them that we'll be announcing probably at the AFSA conference in the first quarter. But it's all about the telephony, and it's all about the data. Because if you're making phone calls, you need to have that piece to the puzzle as well too.
So one of our newest integration partners, they weren't able to be here today to speak to this, but they're definitely a serious partner that we're very happy to get on board, is IDI Data. John, do you have any kind of background you want to talk a little bit about what they're doing?
You know, there's only so many data aggregators. So we talked before, the bureaus, TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. Obviously, they're the source of the data, but typically their data is a little more limited. What we saw that was very interesting in terms of data aggregation years ago was a guy named Hank Asher. They call him kind of the father of data fusion. He built a company called Sizant, and that company was sold to LexisNexis, Reed Elsevier, and became Accurant. And they were really the first large data aggregator of multiple sources of data, buying data from the different sources like Equifax, Experian, and then adding property records, adding everything from the Blockbuster video database at the time to the American Idol cell phone number database or whatever they could tell you that they had. After Hank sold the business, he had a non-compete. He kind of played around a little bit early before the non-compete expired by building a company called TLFO. And they told him, Hank, you can't use the F word, so let's just call it the last one, TLO. And he built that company and unfortunately passed away before he really saw it. Father of data, and turns out that TransUnion was kind of the stalking horse on the bidding process to buy that company, and they've acquired it, and now one of the data providers is actually a data aggregator too, and they have a tremendous amount of data. A lot of the leadership team from the TLO side ended up going over and becoming IDI Data. So now you've got a new entrant in the market, as a data aggregator. We've done some testing on their data. It looks very good. We're excited to have it coming in. And I think you'll find where you've got Clear, where you've got Accurate, where you've got TLO, and now you've also got IDI data coming into masterQueue as one of the major aggregators, and it'll be interesting to see how that data shakes out over time with a lot of you in the room doing the testing beyond what we did at Fine John Doe initially.
This is another new integration partner that we're really excited about. It's something that you're probably not too familiar with. So on that note, Randy from Factor Trust, you want to come up here and talk a little bit about what you guys are doing with alternative credit data?
Sure. Thanks, Jared. And again, I'm Randy Bob with Factor Trust. And before I get started, John, I want to say that you haven't aged a bit from 2011 to today. I did not see any differences. So kudos to you. So my background, I've been in the data information services space for over 20 years. Previously, 8 years at Experian, 8 years at LexisNexis, a couple of years at FICO and White Pages, and now over a year and a half at Factor Trust. So what is Factor Trust? We are an alternative credit bureau. And so alternative data, credit data, is something that you'll hear a lot. And so what we do is, since 2006, we've worked directly with short-term lenders, payday lenders, rent-to-own, installment lenders. So these are really subprime alternative lenders that typically have not reported to our friends at the Big Three. In 2006, we built a unique reporting gateway for these payday lenders to report their data to Factor Trust in real time. So we are a niche supplemental database. Again, we're not going to replace our friends at the Big Three. We're not going to replace LexisNexis. We're additional data collected directly from these alternative lenders, payday lenders, in real time. And so the data they send us is the short-term loan information, the contact data, employment, income, and banking data. So again, it's unique data that you're not seeing today that's sent directly to Factor Trust in real time. And so our integration with masterQueue is new. And so really how we can potentially help you guys is with typically a subprime, near-prime consumer. Our database today is 25 million unique consumers. We grow at about 500,000 consumers a month. And so we're going to have data from these alternative lenders you're not seeing today. And so with our integration, you potentially could get unique right-party contact information. So these payday lenders would report to us in real time a new cell phone, a new address, a new email. Also, new short-term loan activity, new employment, new banking, new income data. So again, it could be real-time unique data you're not seeing today to supplement your data you're getting from others. The other key thing that we see on a daily basis, if someone is present in our database, they are higher risk. It's a subprime database. So from an origination standpoint, if a consumer's in our database, they're twice as likely to go bad if they're not. So from a treatment strategy, that could definitely provide value as well. Not only unique right-party contact information, but if they're in our database, that obviously is a high-risk indicator for maybe a different treatment strategy. So again, the value that we provide is unique data from these alternative lenders, predominantly payday short-term lenders. We work with about 80 to 85% of these lenders. And so it's, again, these lenders typically haven't reported to the Big Three because it's weekly payment cycles, and it's a different format. They typically don't work with the Metro 2 format. So a lot of them haven't really had the ability to report to the Big Three as well. So that's why we built this unique gateway for them to report to us. So that's Factor Trust. We do have a booth at the expo, and I do have a presentation at 1:30 to talk more about alternative data. So let me know if you guys have any questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Randy. So we were really interested when we saw their data, just because it's alternative. You know, anytime you can get new data on top of what you're getting from the bureaus already by the people who are not participating in the bureaus and someone with the scope of what they have is really interesting. So you're not going to get a hit on every single account. Sean, what kind of a hit ratio do you think you're looking at? I mean, it obviously depends upon who the lender is. It depends upon the...
It really depends on the level of delinquency. So like he was talking about, the more delinquent the customer, the more likely it is you'll get a hit. So in charge-off, we're seeing maybe 30-40% hit rate.
Mm-hmm.
But the data that we are seeing is really unique.
So 30 to 40% hit rate, and we're still early to know the RPC rate, right?
Correct.
So...
But the numbers we're seeing are unique.
Yeah. Unique numbers, more unique numbers. You know, the way we track right party contact in masterQueue is when you make, all the data comes in, we sort it, score it, put it in order. There's, 50 phone numbers for that person or 100. What's the most likely phone number? We look at the source. So we say, hey, if it's Equifax, okay, it's probably going to be near the top because they have such a high right party contact rate. If it's a data provider that provides unique numbers, in this case maybe becomes Factor Trust, that could drive it higher. What are the dates? If it's 2003 phone number, okay, then maybe that's not as relevant, but if it's November of 2017, that could be, as a first reported, that could be very relevant. We look at the demographics, we look at the different addresses, and a lot of different attributes, and then we'll put a number on it. So if you got 100 phone numbers, it'll say call this number first, call this number second. Our right party contact rates for the data providers range anywhere from 15% on the low side to 40% or so on the high side. And it'll be really interesting to see that level of data. And I think for some of the users in the room, I think we have the ability to throw some tests out there so they can try it. I don't know if we've got Yamaha I see in the back, and they go live this week, which is great. Thank you guys very much. It might be interesting to throw that in there as well too, just for your test or your go live, so we can talk about that. Thank you guys.
So I want to, I don't even know if they need an introduction really, but Jeremiah from DRN, we just did a press release this morning of their data is now in masterQueue. I'll let you kind of take over, talk about what you're doing.
So thanks everyone for coming out to hang out with us in the desert and beautiful weather. How many people in the room are familiar with DRN? Okay, so I'll tell you a little background. When I met John Lewis, I think it was probably 2011 or 2012, and he said, you got to come out, you got to sit down and look at what we're building, look at what we're doing. I came from a background in the repossession management space, worked for a direct repossession agency, a nationwide repossession agency, and we had a very large skip tracing outfit as well, and we worked for 18 of the top 100, 18 of the top 20 auto lenders out there. And I did that for a while, and then came over to DRN. And when I went out, met with John, I was sitting there and I was looking at masterQueue, just wishing I had that back when I was, training skip tracers, because my job would have been a lot easier, including the compliance factors, worrying about what all those people in that little room are saying on the phone or, not saying on the phone, and I saw the technology and what it was doing with big data and how it was taking it and aggregating it and mapping it and, showing basically this is where you need to go. This is where you need to call. It was very, very simple. And so, working with DRN for the last 7 years now, we've managed to build a database of over 6.5 billion scans, which a scan obviously is a picture taken by an automated license plate reader camera. And it does that, automatically, no matter how fast or slow they're going, no matter, which plates they passed on highways, parking lots, wherever, it's going to capture the data. It captures the latitude and longitude, date and time. And we started using that from an analytical standpoint with a few of our joint customers to test it and to make sure that, it made sense to use it, which obviously if you're familiar with masterQueue and you're familiar with what the system does, it just makes sense to put more location analytics into that, because really what you're looking at its core, when you're looking at a full comp report on an individual and you have a collector sitting there deciding where they're going to call, where they're going to go, it makes sense to overlay where we're seeing their car, because typically people are within 1,000 feet of their car 90% of your life, unless you're just a traveling salesperson all the time. I would say I'm away from my car 90% of my life. But at the end of the day, it's about really providing better tools for collectors, earlier stage, like I said earlier. It's all about just as early and earlier as you can get the data to really make better decisions, whether you're going to run them through an automated process at 5 days, 10 days, 15 or 20 days past due, and then let it roll through those other 3 or 4 stages and groups of collectors and people that you would normally do. And everyone in the room that's a lender, you study your book of business, you know what your roll rates are, you know what's going to charge off typically out of your 60-day bucket, out of your 90-day bucket. And so really what it's about is us putting to use the location data and analytics in the masterQueue platform to try to provide basically better right party contact, better actionable data, and do it earlier in cycle. And we have a panel a lender panel that I'm speaking on tomorrow with Rod Aarons and Jose Esparza from Ally, and Chris Mitchum from Pelican Auto Finance. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about is, not just location data and analytics, but really just collections excellence in general. And so, if anyone has any questions, we'll have a booth also. Happy to help, happy to answer any questions and take a consultative approach to your book of business and make sure that we're providing you a really strong ROI for what the data is able to do at masterQueue.
Appreciate it. You were, it was the ARS, was ASR?
ASR, yeah.
So that was a big repo company that built a big forwarding company, and it ended up getting merged into Primeris, I think, right?
Yeah, eventually, yeah, once it had been stripped down.
So are you frosting your hair?
Yeah, I'm frosting now.
I like that. You have the gift of youth, right? And the braces throw me off a little bit. But
after I met John. Yeah.
I mean, one of the sharpest guys in the industry. Thanks, Jeremiah.
Thank you, guys.
So, Chris, I know you've already been up here and spoke a little bit about the lien verification that you guys have to offer, but I think the Carfax goes a little bit further than that, into some of the records you guys are pulling from service stations and registration information as far as location of where the vehicle might be. So if you want to talk to that, it'd be awesome.
Piggyback off of that.
Yeah.
We can work
Play
those
right
two
into
in
each other.
conjunction with each other, exactly. I think I mentioned before, the strength of Carfax really is the number of records we have. We have over 19 billion records. 70% of that's probably proprietary, and again, 30% probably is in the public domain. So a lot of the best ways we found to find a vehicle are with the recent service activity, if you don't have a picture of the plate. Oftentimes, one of the things is prioritizing in collections also, and I'm not sure if that's on this screen or not, but several examples. Know there was a lender had a car in Phoenix, one of the fancy Mustang, whatever. They were chasing all around Arizona. Turned out it was in a service center broken down in basically a shell in Idaho. Don't even go look for it. Charge it off, place the lien on the lender, on the borrower, move on down the road. A lot of that, what we're doing here also is a lot of the folks you're chasing, doing one of two things. You're chasing either the car or the person. In talking with most lenders, and I was on the lender side for a long time, most of them will tell you that once it's over 90 days or whatever, they really don't care about that person. That person's not going to pay you anyway. I just want to find the car. Give me my car back. So that's what we're trying to do with this. We have relationship with import-export, so we are notified of any cars that do leave the country. Again, the events will tell you if it's no longer operating, what have you. Oftentimes, when a car gets into that skip phase, or do you do it 45 days or 60 days, or I think we talked about that earlier, automatically pull the report, and then you can drop it into, we have what's called VinAlert. You put it into our VinAlert system, and as soon as we have activity, any activity anywhere on that vehicle, it will immediately shoot you an email and let you know where that car is. So oftentimes, we found when cars are that far past due that there's something wrong with them. They're in the shop waiting on a part, waiting on something else, and sure enough, the lender pulls a Carfax report, finds out where the car is, and they send a tow truck out there and pick it up that day. So it's very, very helpful. Our private sources generally give us daily data feeds. So we're getting everything daily and loading them in within 24 hours. So it's pretty real time. Now some of the public sources, the DMVs, and some of those do take a little bit longer. But private sources are like I say, daily. So I think that's about it on the best ways to use it. It's just giving you current location data on where that vehicle is. And at the end of the day, that's really all we care about it over 90 days is just find my collateral. And that's
Right.
the tool that does that.
Yeah, and I think that's where, when obviously, there was a time when email, everybody, most of you guys remember when email was great. It was like, oh, this new tool. And then it's like, okay, email's not great because it's just too much data and it's too many emails. So, especially if they're not relevant, right? So that's where digitizing the data, bringing it in, I think we could probably write some kind of a scrape or something to get the emails and get it in that way. I think that'll be a next step. But, when you look on the screen there, if you've got, you've got the battery changed, or you've got, the airbag deployed, or the car left the country, there's different levels of urgency that happen with each of those events. And, if the guy goes and gets his smog certificate done in Alexandria, Virginia, and you have him living in Alexandria, Virginia, that's probably not that big of a deal. It could be if he's a dead skip and you have just anything new, that's great. But that's probably not a big deal. If he gets his smog changed in, Carlsbad, California, that all of a sudden becomes a relevant event. And this series of urgency in masterQueue, one of the things that Steve taught us in building software was he said your software should alert you to when there's an issue before there's a problem. So he said you want to be able to create a series of alerts that tells you blue, yellow, or red, I think were the colors we came up with. Blue was like, hey, the guy got a smog check in Alexandria and he lives in Alexandria, no big deal, but you should at least look at this. Or yellow is, hey, he got a smog check 150 miles away from his house, you should look at that. Or red might be, he's 90 days past due, you can't repo it, he's in California, he just got a smog check, somebody needs to look at that now. So those different levels of urgency become important through the alerting system, and being able to digitize the data allows us to build the alerts around that. So I think it's good stuff, and it's great. It's just one more piece of data, and it's great data. So appreciate you guys.
Great, great point. And again, you'll notice up there that we do not get involved at all with PII. It is only VIN information, only, and we'll never get into PII. One thing often does happen with that not getting in PII also is that you're looking for Joe Smith has a car in Dallas, and all of a sudden Susie Jones had the oil changed in Denver. Well, we didn't give you that information. What we told you was that the car has oil changed in Denver. And then often lenders will go, hey, listen, call the shop and say, hey, we're the lien holder on this vehicle. We're trying to keep track of the maintenance records. Can you send me over the maintenance records? I see they got their oil changed at your shop. And all of a sudden now you've got a new name, a new address, a new phone number, do everything. So it's a pretty helpful tool.
Great, thank you. Appreciate you coming up.
Thanks.
So what all these integrations mean? What's the point of an interface to one system that's save you guys time? Time is money when you guys are coming to buying data, deciding what data to use, what phone numbers to call, what address to assign out, and the more data providers you can incorporate into one system, the less time you spend actually locating and finding and using intuition to decipher that data into right party contacts or addresses to sign out for repo. So time is money. The more interfaces that we build into masterQueue, the closer we get to that end-to-end solution. I know lenders, you definitely want to have a complete contact downstream through your vendors down to your fourth-party agents in the field. I mean, the end goal is as soon as that car gets repoed, it gets closed in a repossession assignment platform, your loan servicing system gets notified and closes up there. So the more interfaces that we string along the line, the more in contact you are with all your downstream vendors, the more in contact they are with you, the more connected and in touch with everyone the entire industry is. So that's definitely something that we're all working towards. And being able to incorporate all these different data providers into one spot is a big step in that direction.
And at the very end, Jared, too, repossession. Ultimately, when you get to the point where you can't collect the money, you got to repossess the car. And a lot of us are in that business where that's just what we have to do, and it's unfortunate, but it needs to be done. One of the challenges that came to us again was with RepoRoute, where we built the routing software. And Polly, I don't know if you have a second where you could come up and just kind of explain real quick the value proposition of what you bring to the repossession industry and some of the things that you guys are doing. Polly used to work for us at masterQueue, and she was the first RepoRoute employee. She took Victory Recovery Live and helped you guys a lot, I know, and was a great trainer for us, and then it was tough to let her go, but it was important to get the right person who understood technology, understood what we were doing at masterQueue to be able to get at Repo Route. So take a second and kind of share a little bit of what you guys do.
Great, thank you, John. Yeah, I see a few familiar faces in here where I've been at your on-site locations with Sean Hazen when we would be pulling in masterQueue. With Repo Route, you know, we're talking so much about everything that's going on before the actual recovery process and how important all the data is and what everybody's doing with it. But when it gets down to now it's time for that recovery process and it needs to go out to the agents in the field, what happens now? I mean, that sounds like a simple question. They're going to get that information and head out and hopefully go get that car. So what Repo Route comes up with is it's not just mapping, it's not just routing, but there's a lot of analytics that go into that. And one of the exciting parts with bringing Steve on board is that with his expertise and knowledge dealing with big data and analytics with CoreLogic, along with the next program that he built, it's called FastField, it's online forms. Pulling that into Repo Route is really giving now your agencies out in the field, your vendors, a efficient, quick method of picking up that vehicle out in the field. So if our customers, who are the vendors, versus some of the ways that they've done it in the past, which some of them are still doing, I'll talk to guys, they're still working off of maps that are totally against technology, working off of maps and paper. They're taking paper files out into their trucks. It seems such a dinosaur age, but a lot of them believe that's still the way to do it, and that's great, I suppose, if it works for them. But also to be able to get in those addresses that everybody's searching so hard for and using all this data to get it right on their map immediately when it's given to them. That's what masterQueue, or from the information from masterQueue, that's where Repo Route comes in. So we're integrated with RDN, MBSI, which of course is iRepo and Repros, Prios. We're right in the middle of doing one with My Recovery System, which is MRS. And then another big one that we have is we've got an integration with iMetric, which iMetric is provide our GPS units that get hardwired into a lot of the vehicles for a lot of the buy here, pay here throughout the United States, really globally. I understand they have over 1 million GPS units in vehicles out there in the United States alone. We've got an integration with them that puts those vehicles right on our map with their live location. And as John was talking about the different colored icons that mean different things, that's one of the things that we've got with our integration with them is if it's green, it's moving. If it's yellow, it's been sitting for a little bit. Or if it's red, it's been sitting there for a while. Here's the location, get out and go pick up that vehicle. So that's one of the ways we're also moving forward, is reaching out to those different users of iMetric and showing them how we can show that live data right on our Repo Route map. So a little bit later, and by the way, I mentioned FastField. One of Steve's visions with Repo Route is with the FastField forms that he has developed, where you're able to go out and in the field do any forms that you want. You could, with any industry that's needing to do that. The good thing about with integrating that in with Repo Route is that, let's say right now, you've got your agency out in the field. They're doing their asset recovery sheet. They're doing their condition reports. Most of the time they do that condition report, they come into the office, and now the office is having to redo the condition report because so many lien holders have a specific form that they need. Well, with FastFields and Repo Route, now that person can fill out each individual lien holder's form, whatever anybody requires, no matter what it is. If it's a condition report, if it's a asset recovery sheet, if it's a lot inspection form. If you need a form for when your transport driver is showing up to pick up that vehicle and take it off to the auction yard, including pictures, anything that they want to do, it'll be able to be done within Repo Route with our FastField integration, which is coming out soon. And I'm sure Steve's going to be talking more about that. Tomorrow morning, he's going to be speaking at 9:15, talking more about big data. And then also this afternoon, Michael UCW, which of course was John's partner that originally worked with John and James McNeil to develop Repo Route. Michael's going to be talking about predictive analytics. That'll be today at 2:15, so be sure to hit that, as well as Steve's tomorrow at 9:15.
Great, thanks, Polly. And I think what's really interesting about RepoRoute is they have the metrics of what's happening in the field, whether it's through RDN, iRepo, the different systems. And while right now it's a tool for the repossessors to be more efficient, I think what'll be really interesting is that there should be a burden placed upon the lenders to put out a higher quality of assignment. And if I think back, you know, where I look at Rod or Lee, where you guys kind of did what I did, where you were field reps, there was a pride and a quality in the work you put out because you had been in the field. You understood what it was like, and you don't want to waste your time. And now it's kind of just this massive volume of business, and it's so easy to just push a button and send a deal to an agent, and you don't really know if it's good or not, because they're going to run it. It doesn't cost anything. It's free. And I think that at some point that mentality has to change, and part of that can happen through technology, because if you're a lender and your person is assigning accounts out and only 10% of them are being picked up, somebody should look at that and hold that person accountable for putting out a higher quality of work, and maybe through technology you can do that.
So one of the names that came up was MBSI and iRepo. Their repossession assignment platform is probably pretty dominant in the industry. One of our more strategic partnerships. I know Sam's in the room. Sam, do you want to come up and say a couple words about what you guys are doing with masterQueue? The long dramatic walk up.
I would have run, but I ran this morning and I think I pulled a hamstring. First off, I want to thank John for inviting us to speak, and it seems that everybody that's gotten up here has to tell a story about how they met John. So being that I'm the last one to talk, I met John actually it was at Used Car Week out in Phoenix about 2 years ago. And John just happened to be sitting there, you know, working away on his laptop as John does, and I had seen John around the conference, but hadn't really gotten to know him that well. And he sat down next to him, introduced ourselves. We started talking about Crew, because your son, Rose, grew up at the University of Washington. And I had just read Boys in the Boat, so it was a great book, so we had a nice conversation. And he was kind enough to sit down and show me masterQueue, which, before a cup of coffee, very early in the morning in Phoenix, can be very overwhelming because of just how complex that system is. And so me, being a C student from Eastern Illinois, got out my crayons and decided this is how I could best explain how our two systems work together. What masterQueue does very, very, very well is it allows you to take a large amount of information very quickly and focus your collector's efforts on it. And then somebody was kind enough to put up a chart earlier with all the regulations that your collectors have to be aware of, and there was a lot. And I, being trying to be a little creative, said, I can't remember all those. But what John has basically built is the masterQueue compliance engine, which keeps your people only calling when they're supposed to be calling and only collecting where they're supposed to be collecting. And I did tell John that I did trademark that, and I will sell him back to it for a nominal fee. But as your collectors are sitting there and going through and working these files, and we've heard a lot of talk about data and the importance of digitizing data and making good decisions off data, all of a sudden you're at a point where you're going to send this out to the repossession agent. And here's where the integration is key with iRepo, in that it starts as compliant as John's system is for the collectors out in the field. Our ecosystems helps the lenders be compliant, confident of the compliance out in the field when it hits the truck. Due to our partnerships with many of the forwarders and several direct agents, we now have the ability to send live assignment data out. But the agent also has the ability to check that assignment data out in the field to make sure that it's still valid for repossession. That is the one key thing that we built into the Recovery Connect mobile application, is to stop wrongful repos and give live assignment data back. We've also put some compliance modules in place because the CFPB has come back and said, Mr. Lender, whether you do business with a forwarder or a direct agent, you're responsible for their actions out in the field. And we've heard several times today that people don't like logging into multiple systems, that they want it all in one spot. So with the modules that we built in place, we give lenders the ability to go in and in one system audit their agents and make sure that everything's up to snuff. They can also handle complaints in a centralized portal, and those are all tied together that they can be analyzed through data analytics. The other part, though, that we're really seeing, where we're starting to see the initial lift through the Recovery Connect mobile application, and I heard somebody talking about it earlier, is it's starting to digitize a lot of data. The most important one that we saw right away is the condition report on the car coming back after repossession. Before, the condition report was in many, many different forms. It may have been handwritten. It was basically checkmarked. We now have it digitized coming back that we know if the airbags are blown. We know exactly where the car's stored. We know the condition of the damage on the car, so we can actually start giving a very good life cycle on what that car looks like on the agent's lot. This is important for two facts. One, we've seen that damage claims in the agent's office that are using the Recovery Connect mobile application have gone down because the data is documented so well that the customer comes in and just says, that scratch wasn't there. Ma'am, actually it was. Here's the photos of your house. I have an L&L stamp. This was taken less than a half a mile from your house. That dent was there. Okay, I'll go my merry way. The client goes their merry way. The second piece is where that comes in is if you're using companies that are pursuing outside insurance to reduce your balance charge-offs, they don't have to wait for the car to get to auction anymore. Before they were having to boil an ocean of auction data in PDF format to find those cars, and now we've integrated with several of them to give them a UI where they can immediately start identifying those cars and reducing your charge-offs. The data that we have, we're just really starting to, our clients are really just starting to scrape the possibilities of. We're starting to move down to the remarketing area. And as a matter of fact, we have a breakout session on Wednesday for that, where on average we found that it takes 7 phone calls to find out where the car is when you're looking to transport it. And with the data that we have, the banks have kind of looked in and the remarketing companies have come in and said, wait a minute, you know where the car is? You know if I need a flatbed or if I can get it on a 10-car trailer? Let's sit down and talk and let's start shortening that time to auction cycle. So I think as we begin to move forward and as things begin to move where we're being forced to be compliant, not only in the collection area, but where it's being pushed down to the agent in the field, it just seems that there's data points that can be gathered that can protect the agent out in the field and to protect the lender up in front. So, and
Great.
Thank you for your time.
When were you at Eastern Illinois University?
Pardon?
When were you at Eastern Illinois University?
I was at Eastern Illinois University. I graduated in 1988.
Okay. So Lee, you talked about coincidences. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I appreciate that. I went to Eastern, but it was 10 years earlier. But who, by a show of hands, knows who Mohammed Atta? Who knows that name? Anybody want to tell me? 9/11. So Hank Asher said, if this person lived next door to Muhammad Atta, it may have been a coincidence. If this person lived next door to Muhammad Atta twice, it wasn't a coincidence. That's how he figured out who the 9/11 guys were. They took Hank Asher, or they didn't take him, they asked him, and he was probably honored to sit probably in a basement in his house and just go through massive amounts of data because he was the only person the government felt could probably use that TLO data that he had built to be able to find those guys that fast. But that's nothing compared to the coincidence that I heard today. Amy, what's your dad's name? John. What's your mom's name? Perla. So Perla and John. And what's your last name? What was your maiden last name? So John and Perla Lewis are your parents. Lee, it doesn't get any better than that. That is impossible. That is a coincidence. Wow.
So I'm just going to fly through these next slides in the, just trying to keep on track here. Integrations eliminate the risk of human error. If something happens in one system, we can automate the process of that same action happening in another system. There's no risk of a human forgetting to do that or mistyping a phone number or a piece of data point. It's an automated process that just adds to that end-to-end solution. Better communication, the lender down to the agent. Like I said, the repo agent picks up the car, the lender knows immediately all collections are ceased right there. So getting back to the end solution, where we're going, definitely a mind and a goal that we have in mind. for the future. So these are our current integration partners. We're always looking for the newest, greatest thing to bring to our users and make your guys' experience better than what it is now. All these guys are great. We love working with everybody. If you have any questions around them, you don't have contact information, you can come to me or any one of us. We can help you get in contact with them. So question number 3, I think there were some issues with the app, but if anybody wants to raise their hands, I'm sure there's a lava lamp in there somewhere. At what point in the collections process does a skip tracer's intuition replace an automated system that tells them what numbers to call and what addresses to assign for repo? So think about that a little bit. If anybody's got an answer right off the bat, go ahead and raise your hand. We got a couple lava lamps up here. If not, then everyone can just stay humble and Sandra. 30 to 60 days.
There you go. We'll bring the lava lamp to your training on Thursday.
Yeah.
That was easy.
Anybody could have had a lava lamp. It was that easy. All right. So, Brian, I'll introduce you to artificial intelligence. Kind of let you take it away from here.
So no offense to any blondes in the room. I am a natural blonde. You can't tell it because it's all gone now. But artificial intelligence, it's kind of the buzzword that is one of the major themes of this entire conference. So a lot of people are going to talk about it. I'm not here to necessarily tell you what it is because there are people with far more experience in the field who can do that throughout the course of this conference. What I want to do is kind of change the way that we think about it. You guys are all here because you understand the importance of integrating with systems that have some form of artificial intelligence. Now, we have artificial intelligence from the movies that we like to associate stuff with, but that's not what we're actually talking about. And so what I want to do is play a couple games with you guys, and they're not games that are just ha-ha games. They're games that, honestly, if you want the slides, you could take them back to your teams, and if people are struggling understanding the importance of it and the limitations of the human brain and what we're good at and what we're not good at, you can use the slides and play the game with them. It's kind of a fun way to look at it. So the first game we're going to play is an intuition game. Now, with this game, I'm going to ask that you guys not plug into your phones, that you look at the screen, and I just want you to shout out the word/phrase that you see. Now, generally in this game, women are much better because they don't have the same ego and sort of logic checks that men have. So they will just say a thing. If it's wrong, no big deal. The men tend to sit back and say, well, it could be this. I don't know if it's this. Which one am I going to go with? And then by that time, the moment's gone. Some woman has already shouted it out, and you're like, yeah, that was it. Dang it, I missed it. So guys, try and get rid of that natural tendency that most of us have, and just feel free to shout out a word. If it's wrong, it's all right. It's not a big deal.
This is an interesting thing. So I spoke at the LA District Attorney Conference, and the guy who spoke before me was a guy named Gavin DeBecker. He built the Mosaic system for CIA, which is used for background checks. He's a very smart guy. Oprah's last season, they devoted 2 full shows to him, talking about domestic violence and talking about intuition. And I remember the guy talking about, you're a woman and you get into an elevator with a guy who looks a little creepy, and your intuition tells you something's wrong, but you're like, oh, I don't want to worry about what he's wearing, but you're going to get into a 12-foot locked steel chamber with the guy. No animal would do that. And he talks about that, and he talks about your mind, and it's really interesting because that's how we've all relied on skip tracing for so long, is the intuition of all of us doing this for so long. And as I said in the video, we're not all Alex Price. We haven't all done this that much where our intuition really can work. And you're managing a team of people, you really don't want to rely on their intuition. But intuition is very powerful, which is why I think you're seeing it go from artificial intelligence to artificial intuition. Because really, intuition is, again, it's your brain, and your brain's smart. So this game is kind of interesting, and these slides are Gavin's slides, and he was kind enough to share them with me. And it could be a word, phrase, it could be a game. The idea is just to look at the word or the series of words and try to figure out what it is, and then shout it out. And sometimes, don't worry about shouting something out wrong, but if you shout it out right, you might get a lava lamp.
Yeah, so this will be good for prizes. There's a couple of games through this series that get you guys thinking about artificial intelligence, as you go through and listen to different speakers throughout the conference, you can think about how does this play into what my brain is actually limited in. My background is not in collections, by the way. My background, I studied anthropology. I did a lot of cognitive neuroscience in that. And in anthropology, you do a lot of data analytics. So I like looking at the data and thinking about things like this. So, oh, I got it. You guys see it? Next slide.
The rate is in the crease.
Rate, increase. Okay. So now that you guys see how it works, just feel free to shout it out. Boom. Colin Powell. Good job, Randy. Yeah, there we go. Shortest distance between 2 points. Good. Next slide. There we go.
Oh.
A little bit more difficult. There we go. An eye for an eye. Good. Yeah. If you know it, just get it. It's okay. We're all adults. You can say it. There we go. There we go. There we go. All right. See? What was it? This one?
Robert De Niro, I heard in the back.
Okay. How many of you guys didn't see Robert De Niro? Yeah, it's based on logic, right? Almost so logical that we miss it, right? We've got these spaces, and then you see a D near an O, and your brain doesn't put together that that's a proximity thing, and okay, it's Robert D. Niro. Right?
How many thought Robert Downey? Anybody? It's not as popular.
Okay, so this is a game that I like to play because it really brings into context what our brains are actually capable of. Okay, so I just want you guys to take a minute, memorize this 4-section square. Okay, there are 4 colors associated with it. This kind of appears as like a blue-black, all right? So one of these colors is going to change. So I just want you to take a minute, memorize the square, see if you can keep track of all 4 colors and their positions. So Sean, let's take a minute, just one quick second on the next slide. Go ahead. So there's a break here just to see if your short-term memory can hold on to it. All right? Sean, next slide. Okay. Yeah, so the pink one changed. Did anyone not see the pink one change? Did anyone see an associated color? A lot of people see the green one change, actually. They feel like I'm trying to trick them. They're like, no, the pink's too obvious. Something else changed. Okay? Our brains like to do that. Our brains like to say, I'm being tricked. And in my short time skip tracing, my brain constantly went to, am I being tricked? Are they trying to fool me? And in a lot of cases, yes, the debtors are trying to fool the skip tracers and the collections teams. But that's really what we're looking at when we look at these 4. Now, Sean, go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay? Take a moment to memorize this one. Okay? Now, this is a simple 10 by 10 square. Okay? So that's 100 accounts. That's 100 points of data. Okay? If any one of these changes, the likelihood of us knowing which one it was goes down dramatically. But we're asking our collections teams, our skip teams, to work 100 of accounts. With all the great data that's out there, we're getting more than 100 points of data if we run a couple different reports, especially if we run a big comprehensive report. You could get thousands of points of data, and that, increases the data points way beyond 100. So I just want to see if anyone has the capability to do this. So take a moment, just think about it, and we'll move on to the next slide. So we've got all these buzzwords floating around. You'll see them. We've got big data, we've got machine learning, we've got predictive analytics, we've got artificial intelligence. So, and that's what they are, really, are buzzwords. People are going to define them differently. You'll hear them defined differently throughout the course of this week. And I really recommend that you take some time to dig in and do research if if you're trying to figure out what it means to you, because everyone here will define it differently. And are we truly at a point of artificial intelligence? No. And the reason that I say that is because Hollywood has kind of defined it for us. The Hollywood definition has not been met yet. But big data is just that 100 squares, right? That's big data to us. That's too much for me to memorize. It's too much for most of the people in this room to be able to see if something changes. So big data is basically anything that we can't comprehend or our system can't comprehend because there's too much of it. So our brains have a very limited capacity for that. Some of our softwares have a great capacity, and other softwares don't have that capacity. We need rooms, 40 times as big full of GPUs to be able to calculate all of that data that's coming in.
Yes,
So,
Steve and I were talking the other day, and one of the things that you mentioned to me was we were talking about intuition. And you said, intuition is great when you really have it nailed down. But if you don't, it's really bad. And if you think about a collection department, and you think about you're relying on intuition of people, and do you really know they have that good of intuition that they can get it right to that degree? Can they figure out what square was missing out of that thing? Because that's how much data they're looking at. And it's interesting to really think about that when you think about how we do things now.
so super brief history. Anyone know what this machine is? What? Yes. Steve gets a prize.
That's a prize.
Okay.
Prize
It
winners
is.
can come up at the end and grab your prizes.
So it's the Turing machine. The Turing machine broke the Germans' Enigma encryption machine. Why is this important? Because Alan Turing is considered the father of artificial intelligence. But when we think about what this machine actually did, it basically read the code, put every possible logical combination of what the different encryptions could be, and then it spit it out, and it's like, this one's not good, this one's not good. So through a process of elimination, it finally got down to this is what the code has to be. Okay? Anybody use this app ever? Okay, everyone uses this app, right? So we've got this predictive analytics, right? You've got thousands of points coming in to Google. Everyone's location service is turned on. Google says, uh-oh, it's gonna be red. You're gonna lose 11 minutes on your commute time, okay? That's a basic real-time predictive analytics, okay? Anyone invest? Anyone who invests has probably done some research. If you're smart, you've done some research into your investments. You look at trends, trying to figure out, okay, is there a seasonal trend to this? And charts for that have been around, as long as the stock market's been around. And stock companies invest millions and billions of dollars trying to figure out if they can predict it beyond a statistic from the past. Are we there yet? Not quite. So the real question is, are these truly predictive? Not all of these are, and that's really, we're in the infancy of what is truly predictive, okay? Right now, predictive for us is putting a statistic on it. For masterQueue, it's putting a statistic on the likelihood of the data leading towards a positive resolution for you. For a company that is putting that into trucks, they're saying there's a 90% chance that the car is here right now. That's a predictive analytic based on whatever algorithm they've created to get those statistics for the end user. Okay. Anybody see the change? I love it. I love it. I see people thinking. I see people counting. There's some people that said, I forgot that this square existed because he started talking about other stuff. There are two pinks together, but that's not the change. Okay. Sean, can you click one more slide forward? Did it freeze? Okay. It may have gone more than one slide there. Okay. So we're going to come back to it then. Okay. So why is it so difficult to figure that out? And Sean, we can just click through these next couple slides. Why is this so difficult to figure out? And I saw it in the room. You guys can't see what I was seeing out there, but something called the paradox of choice, right? How did you decide how you're going to focus your efforts? You had 100 squares to choose from. You knew ultimately that you were not going to be able to keep track of 100 squares. So I saw a gentleman back there, he was counting. So he's like, I know there's 100, I know it's 10 by 10. I'm gonna check to see if it's still 10 by 10. Did he drop it? Is it 9 by 10 or is it 9 by 9 now? Some of you guys may have said, well, I can see the red ones really clearly. Okay? Sean, click forward one more. Okay? Some of you guys would have different tactics. I know when Sean did it, he was like, I'm just going to watch this top row. I'm going to watch the first 5, see if they change, because I think Brian's going to change something in the first 5. Okay? And that was just a guess that he had. He went on a hunch. Okay, one more. You guys see it then? So if the change happens in front of your face, you can see it. It's very clear that that purple one, it went to blue, and we just changed it back to purple. So that's the only one that changed. So if you weren't looking for it, or if you weren't focusing on the blue squares, it would have been very difficult to see. Okay? A computer would know that, because it's binary. It changed a binary function. So let's say that those were 100 points of data that your skip users or your end users are trying to get through. But now we know, okay, it's no longer, all the other colors are unimportant to me except the ones that are associated with blue. Okay? And this is where artificial intelligence comes in. It starts to pare down the data for you. The predictive analytics come in and says, all right, everything that's blue is good, associated with a blue color, and the colors on my screen are a little bit different than what are coming through the projector. And then let's say it goes further and it says the weaker association, and we just got rid of it, the older the data is dark blue. So let's get rid of that. So the dark blues went away. And then we just got rid of the greens. Let's say that the greens were a weaker association. So the closer to green it was, the weaker the association with the person we're looking for. Okay? And now we've got far fewer points of data. And we still have those rules in place that darker are older, but we've got some that could still be useful. Okay? And those lighter colors are the best ones. Okay? Now put that into masterQueue and you get a similar structure. We just call it the FindX score. So that's how our predictive analytics, our artificial intelligence, and I'll put quotes around that, because it's not a fully mutating algorithm yet, but it is an algorithm that takes a lot of components into play to create a score here for the end user so that they don't have to look at 1,000 points of data. Okay? How many of you guys have ever tried to beat the arrival time on Google Maps? Okay? We did it on the way here. Okay? Didn't even know that it was part of my presentation, but we won by like 3 minutes. Okay? So why do we do that as human beings? Okay? It's because there's ultimately an inherent distrust that a computer could be better than us. Okay? And I see it when I go out and I train skip tracers, that there's this fear that, like, is this computer better than me? Okay? I know, no, I'm going to use my intuition. And as John said, for the people who don't have intuition, it can be really bad. And so if you've got those all-stars, great. But for the average person, they need to be using tools where the computer is better than them and then learn how that is working and just grind. They're just cogs in the wheel of grinding through these accounts to get it there for you guys, okay? We don't want to wind up where this is not going to happen, you know? Terminator's not going to happen. If it does, there's nothing we can do about it. Okay? So we need to continue to build that trust, and for you guys involved in the industry, that's a big deal. Because a system like masterQueue or any system that you're using that makes things easier, if people don't trust it or they think they're better than it, they won't use it to its full capacity. Okay? Obviously, right where we're at right now is combining historical data with some analytics. And we can also through a lot of these slides because I know we're running a little short on time. Go ahead. So can we go back one? So I want you guys to just quickly, I just pulled a couple data reports on myself, okay? You'll notice my name here, Brian Geist. Everything you need to find me is on this sheet, okay? But interestingly, if you look at that top one, that's not me. Anyone want to, for a prize, guess how that person is related to me? Not wife, not girlfriend. Mother. Not my mom. Not an alias. Okay, I'll just give it to you guys. That's my sister-in-law. Okay, and we'll come back to that in a second, because if you needed to get a hold of me with the data that's provided here, she is an incredibly good lead, and we'll come back to that in just a second. Okay, so I just wanted to give you guys a quick example. Anyone know who this is? Got a lot of questions. I want to get rid of all these prizes. Okay, one more picture of him. Maybe you guys will get it. Yeah, Bobby Fischer. Okay, so everyone likes to think that they're Bobby Fischer, but if you're like me at chess, you're like this guy, right? Next, click, go ahead and click, right? I can't beat a kid, so I'm not going to beat a computer. And I know that about me in chess. In the skip industry, that's what we need to convince a lot of our skip tracers who are not the Bobby Fischers of the skip tracing world, is that they're not Bobby Fischer, they're a guy who's trying to beat a kid, and they need to just let the computer help them. Okay. So again, we're not looking to create savants. We're trying to get the computer to help get to the point where people are just as efficient as possible. So where are we going with this? Go ahead and click through these, Sean. Okay. It's not so much a crossroads that we're at, it's more of a confluence. And you can click through these slides. Okay. We're trying to get the software skill to mimic as best we can our all-stars. Okay. So whether you're in the field and you're driving a tow truck and you're trying to, your best tow truck driver's got that great intuition of where cars are and you're trying to help the software mimic that, or you're a skip tracer trying to do the same thing, that's what we're trying to do in the industries that are building artificial intelligence, right? These guys are great, and this is actual data, okay? They're great, but I've only got 2 of them, right? So how do we get these people here to buy into the fact that they need to not try and use the intuitive skills that these guys are using and just use the data that's in front of them and just grind it out? That's a real key in the industry, because people inherently have this, it's me versus the computer. And you can click through these.
I have a great idea for you, John. Put a reward system in there, maybe for clients. So if you follow the process, they start to accumulate points.
Yeah.
Modern gaming systems, right?
Gamification.
Oh, that's awesome.
Make it a video game. Make the collection process a video game. And they earn status and levels.
They go quite that far. Earn some reward points that eventually they can use as cash in.
Get a lava lamp.
Airline miles.
Yeah.
Get a lava lamp or whatever.
Yeah. I think you're going to see that gamification as the kids of today's generation who are playing video games, didn't grow up, maybe the same thing some of us did. They like that, the challenge.
So can we go back 2 slides, actually, Sean? I just wanted to touch real briefly. One more slide back. So if we were to start off and use masterQueue the way that it's designed, okay? The first number I have that's a good subject number is this top number right here for my sister-in-law. Why is that important? Because for 7 years, I worked with my sister-in-law. I never had my cell phone on me. I didn't like it. I was kind of against the whole, I was like rebelling against being connected to the world, okay? Yeah, it'd be great if you had my mom's number or my brother's phone number, but my brother and I talk like once every 2 weeks, so he's not gonna really know what I'm up to, okay? My mom, if I'm at work 8, 10, 12 hours a day, my mom would have no idea. The people closest to me wouldn't know, but she actually was with me for a majority of my life, okay? Which is probably why we both had the same business address, and this probably came up as a connection, and if you called her, you would get a very good idea of where I was at. And not only that, she always picks up her cell phone. So it just happens that through the algorithms that would be the case. So if I had trusted the computer, okay, in this case masterQueue, to make those decisions for me, rather than deciding to beat it and say, I don't like this number, even though it scored very high in its likelihood to provide me with a positive result, I may have missed out on that. I may have been like, no, I'm interested because I have bad intuition in this New Haven, Connecticut thing, even though it's way back here. I think he's hiding in Connecticut.
Most skip tracers would look at that data for Stephanie and say the best one on there is the 2016 one because that was the first reported date. And the other ones are reported first in 1986 and 2012. So that's probably like a parent's address or something. So they would think intuitively that's not the best one. But you're telling us the best one is the top phone number for her because that's her cell phone that she picks up.
And that's all I did to create this slide was I just sorted by the Findex score. Okay, now if you go down to the next good subject, not only do you get the address that I'm currently at, but you also get my current cell phone number. So just using the data, the scrub, right? The scrub went out, it checked, it said, this caller ID goes to Brian, let's mark it as good for subject. Boom. Call it, you're gonna get my voicemail, which, you know, I'm not a debtor, so it says, hey, you've reached Brian Geist, please leave me a message. Okay, so we got one more flexor. Okay, I just want you to think about it. It's gonna be an honesty whether you got it or not. I'll give you, 10 seconds to think about it. And I'm gonna show you how the artificial intelligence and computer programming that only looks at the obvious and changes very simple things can make this very obvious, hopefully, to those of you who look at this flexor and say, what the heck am I looking at?
Anybody figure it out?
Got some ideas.
Shout it out. Tennis anyone.
Okay, love it. Perfect. Okay, so for those of you who still can't see,
lava
like, okay,
at the end.
right? We run a computer program. All it does is like count stuff. So it counts, okay, there are 10 S's, and then I think the animation may go and move that. Nope, it's gone. Okay, so just by counting the number of S's and putting a 10 in front of it, all of a sudden it makes sense to us. And that's so simple, right? So just counting the number of phone numbers we have, or the number of times that phone number has appeared throughout a bunch of data reports, now all of a sudden we have a much more clear view of how artificial intelligence can help us in this industry and how important it is, because how many of you guys were able to do the 4 squares? I know some people, it's not. 4 and 5 is the upper end of what we can remember. So if you can't, you're not alone. But 100 is way too much, and so much of this industry takes us way beyond 4. So hope you guys are able to take some of those ideas and move with them throughout the rest of this conference.
So I just wanted to say thank you all for showing up. Thank you for being here. Brian, I think you put a lot of good thoughts together in regards to what artificial intelligence is, and we'll hear a lot more about that throughout the rest of the show. Grab a lunch on the way out if you need one. Thanks again for everybody coming. Appreciate your time. And if you pick the right prize, or if you're one of our customers, you're welcome to come up while there's some dibs on the table and grab it. And if you want a lava lamp, we can mail it to you.
For those of you that want to know more about the rest of the presentation too, feel free to go to the booth and, chat with us. We'll talk with you a little bit more about vendor management and workflow.